Okay, order. I think I'll resume the meeting. Let me remind the witness that he's still under oath. Okay, yeah, please proceed.
Dr. Thum, if you haven't found that document, doesn't matter. We will carry on. Listen to the question again. Now, Dr. Thum, I'm not asking you about broader points yet. I'm referring to an answer you gave. And by reference to that answer, I'm asking you a question. So please understand that.
Yes.
Your initial answer, and it may have been mistaken, was that those two sentences I pointed you to were inconsistent with each other. Now that you have read it again a few times, would you agree that there is no inconsistency on the face of it?
I disagree.
Okay, so you say on the face of it there is inconsistency.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me what is inconsistent on the face of it, without reference to anything else.
If he, as Secretary General of the Malayan Communist Party, does not know facts and figures of his own organization, how would he know how people not in his organization could possibly think?
Can I suggest, Dr. Thum, if that's the best you can say, it's very poor, and I'll explain to you why. I think you are struggling very hard to try and come up with explanations, I'm sorry to say this, which simply don't wash. And let me explain. It would be extremely astonishing if he could put a number, a figure, a number of people whom they controlled among the voting public because of the nature of the organization. But he can make the statement, which is slightly more general, that members of the unions appreciated they were under the control of the CPM. Because they were controlling the CPM, the CPM was controlling the unions, and they had their members in there. And the way it worked, he knew that the members knew they were under the control of the CPM. I don't see any contradiction at all to that.
No, that doesn't make any sense, I'm sorry.
That doesn't make any sense. And
your statement does not make any sense.
so you say these two statements are inconsistent.
Yes, I maintain
Have
that.
you said that anywhere before, that these two statements are inconsistent?
I don't think so, no.
No. Is this the first time this is striking you, that these two statements are inconsistent?
This is the first time anyone has asked me in public about these two statements. But
That-
no, this page I have read before and I have looked at for my work.
Right. Now, are you able to say that this statement, members of these unions well appreciated they were under the control of CPM, when Thum Ping says that, that is inaccurate?
Well, his statement is that he can certainly say that members of these unions well appreciated they were under the control of the CPM. I believe that to be inaccurate, yes.
You believe that to be?
Inaccurate.
Inaccurate.
Yes.
And your reasons for saying that you believe that what Thum Ping is saying is inaccurate?
Well, we come back. Can I bring in the broader context now?
We'll come back to that later, but in your view, it's inaccurate. But you will tell us whether you have referred to his statements in this context in any public statement of yours, correct? Whether you have referred to his statements in any published journal or any of the journals that are referred to in the bibliography, presumably you haven't, correct?
Not to this statement, no.
Thank you. Now, if his statements are correct, if, that's a big if, and let's accept that you disagree with him. But if his statements are correct, then the left-wing trade unions who are part of the progressive left, as you call them, your statement that there's no evidence of communist influence in them, your statement would be inaccurate if his statement is accurate, correct? The two are directly contradictory.
If his statement is correct, it would overturn decades of historical consensus. So
Right.
yes, I accept what you're saying.
Now, historical consensus, that's a big phrase. From what I can see, there is historical consensus the other way up to recently. Now, let's look at page 7 of the ARI paper. You say, looking at the third and fourth paragraphs, the basis of the PAP's victory in 1959 was the progressive left and the trade unions, correct? The very last sentence, organizational basis for PAP election victory in 1959.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, go back to what Thum Ping says. Then, the victory in 1959 was really because the CPM was directing the trade unions and the so-called progressive left, correct?
Thum Ping's wrong.
I understand, but if he is right, then you are wrong, correct? I mean,
Can you
your
clarify
statement
that
directly
statement again, sir?
contradicts. Your statement directly contradicts
no, that
him.
statement does not also say that they were in direct control. It says, if I remember, sorry, maybe you want to bring it up, members well appreciated that they were under the control, which is a slightly different thing.
Let's look at that sentence and the sentence after that. Our supporters, sympathizers, and fellow travelers went on to provide Lee's grassroots electoral support. Our supporters, that's the communist supporters, communist sympathizers, and fellow travelers went on to provide Lee's grassroots electoral support. Without them, he would have never achieved his stunning 43-seat victory in the 51 constituencies. I think you're smart enough to know what I'm asking. His statement directly contradicts your statement. Agree or disagree?
May I elaborate?
You can first disagree and then elaborate.
Okay, I disagree. Right.
Thank you.
Now, there are a number of nuances here which one must appreciate, right? First of all, when analyzing a source, of course, we have to look at it from the source's perspective and understand that they also are working with limited knowledge, right? And another, for example, issue with a source might be that they're writing this 50 years later, and there's no citation
let me
for
just get a clarification before you go on.
Yes.
Are all these things what you have analyzed before, or these are things that you're telling me now?
No, these are things I've analyzed before.
Is it published anywhere other than your PhD thesis?
I think I've argued this in several of my articles. Wait, published,
No,
when you say
about
it, what is it?
Thum Ping specifically, that why he cannot be relied upon when he says all of this.
I have not published an article explaining why Thum Ping is an unreliable witness, if that's what you mean.
Have you applied your mind and given these reasons that you're going to give now, specific to this statements of Thum Ping at any place previously?
Well, this statement, which says, which statement? Our supporters, sympathizers, and fellow travelers went on to provide least grassroots
That-
electoral support.
Yes.
That statement has been cited, and I have interrogated that and explained the nuances of that statement.
Right. Where have you
So-
cited it?
Oh boy. May I have some time to check through my
Okay,
published
you will
doc-
come back to us with that.
Oh, okay, add it
Yes.
to the list.
No.
Yes, so, sorry, can I check, what page number is this?
Page 409. Chin Ping. So the question was, have you ever stated what you're now saying about this source in
Okay,
public?
I want to be clear, right? I said that statement has been published elsewhere, right? It has been cited elsewhere.
That statement has
Yes.
been cited elsewhere.
Yes, and I said I interrogated other people's use of that statement.
Oh,
so I'm not
sorry.
saying I'm
I'm asking you, the question I'm asking you is
Right.
different.
okay.
I'm asking you whether you have referred to this statement and critiqued it and analyzed it in any published work.
No, I don't think so, no.
Thank you. Now, in
Would you
which
still like
case-
me to critique the statement?
Not really, because the question in my mind was, have you done it before?
I have, what's that law of properties? I have critiqued other people's use of that statement. Does that
Right.
count?
Well, you can give to us what you have critiqued about other people's use, and we will look at it.
So you don't want me to answer that right now?
We'll
You want
come
me
back to that, maybe. We'll take a record and we can look through
Right.
in terms of the time we have. Now, Chin Ping then goes on to say, in our review of the Singapore election results, the Central Committee rightly predicted that the victorious Lee would one day move against the CPM to consolidate its power. We appraised our cadres accordingly, but could do little more. Is that something that you agree with?
There's no evidence for this. He just says it.
All
You know,
right.
he can say anything he wants. I can't tell unless he has a citation.
Have you critiqued it before?
Well, there's no point critiquing something that is unprovable. How am I supposed to critique that?
Right. Now, maybe since I'm going to move on to a different point, you can tell me what you have said about other people citing that earlier sentence. Maybe in summary. Yeah.
Okay. So this sentence and other examples like it is often used to show the existence of a communist conspiracy, right? But I point out that there is no evidence of a communist conspiracy. There's no evidence that the detainees of Operation Cold Store were involved in any communist conspiracy. That this is a very broad-ranging sentence. Our
Dr. Thum,
supporters,
just in case,
sympathizers,
Dr.
and fellow-
Thum,
yes.
just in case you didn't understand the question, for the time being, I'm not getting into Operation Cold Store. I'm simply talking about whether you have specifically critiqued other people citing this particular sentence and whether you have given your views, your own views,
Yes,
on that critique of this sentence.
I have given my views, and I
On
thought you were
their
asking me to give
critique-
those views right
Yeah,
now.
on the critique of
Yes.
this sentence, not anything beyond it.
I was getting to that.
Yes,
Right. First,
then
you need
please
to
get
set
to
the
that.
sentence in context.
Yes.
Right, and understand the context in which the sentence is being said and understood. Right. So you need to understand the issues surrounding the source. So to get to the sentence itself, for example, as I mentioned, right, it's used as to show that there was some sort of widespread communist conspiracy. I have pointed out there is no evidence. Our supporters, sympathizers, and fellow travelers also does not mean that any of these people were actually Communist Party members, as he's made clear elsewhere, as Yu Choi Yip did say, I was the only cadre left. As Chin Ping said, the organization had been smashed, we had no contact. It is entirely possible that, and very likely, that many people in Singapore were supporters in the sense of, I believe in the Communist Party of Malaya because they were the leading anti-colonial force. They had not saved, they were the main source of resistance against the Japanese in World War II. So to support the Malayan Communist Party was entirely possible and not illegal, right? The Malayan Communist Party itself was an illegal organization, but it was not illegal to believe in communism, nor was it illegal to express, there was no thought police, right? Mentally, you could support the Malayan Communist Party. Likewise, sympathizers, I can sympathize with someone without being a member, without being part of a conspiracy. Fellow travelers is very, very broad. Anyone, in this definition, anyone who is against British colonialism, according to special branch as well, is classified as a fellow traveler. And thus that includes, for example, the People's Action Party. It includes the parties on the right, the conservative parties, the Liberal Socialist Party. So that's the broader context of the sentence. Okay. So it shows a wide level of support for anti-colonialism. It doesn't show a comprehensive underground communist conspiracy, and that's the point I make.
Well, don't you think all of that falls flat if you look at one of the earlier sentences? I can certainly say that most of the island's workers sympathized with the left-wing trade unions, and members of these unions well appreciated they were under the control of the CPM. We looked at that sentence. I don't need an answer from you now. You have disagreed with that sentence. We leave that on the record. But I just suggest to you that your answer is contradicted, all your extended analysis, if Thum Ping is right in that sentence. But in your view, he is wrong. So let's move on.
Well, he's wrong because the special branch has no evidence.
Right.
Yes.
Because special branch has no evidence, that is the reason why he is wrong?
Well, may I get into the wider context?
No, I mean, you keep throwing new things. You didn't say it just now.
I did. I started talking about the wider context, and you said, no, I'm just talking about this page.
I know that you're very keen. I'm just telling you that if this sentence that I just read out is correct, which you disagree with, then all these other wider contexts that you've just told us is not accurate. But if you want to explain that, we'll try and come back to it. Now, let's look at Lee Tung Hui. You're aware of
yes,
him?
Lee Tung Hui, yes. 1996. His book was published in
1996. Cast your eye over this. I don't know whether they're able to put it up. Page 84. In May 1955, let me read out to you while putting it up. You have read this book, by the way?
Yes, it's cited in my RE
Thank you.
Paper.
Yes. In May 1955, other than the troubles in the Hockley Bus Company, there were disputes between employees and employers in other places. And then he talks about them. And he says, in the end, a number of persons involved in the sympathy strikes totaled 20,000 because of Singapore Bus Workers Union. After the Battle of Hockley had been successfully concluded, the communists followed up with a plan to bring out more than 100,000 persons in sympathy strikes. To realize this, they aimed to make use of the conflict then going on at the Singapore Harbour Board, and he talks about that. 140,000 of the 300,000 labor force were unionized. He talks about them being English-speaking, and that particular union was controlled and influenced by the PAP non-communists. And he talks about the quarrel. And over the page, he talks about the SFS Workers' Union, headed by Chin Seong, announcing that they will go on strike and what it would have done. And in the last paragraph at page 85, what the SFSU managed to do 16,000 persons stopped work, but the communists put the number at 60 or 70,000. Communists declared that the strike would go on until the detained persons were released or brought to trial, and then what Marshall announced. I assume that you disagree that this was, whenever Mr. Lee refers to, Lee Ting-hui refers to the communists, you disagree with that, correct?
Yes, he applies the term very loosely.
Right. Now, would you accept that they were communist inspired?
The strikes?
Yes.
No,
Remember
they,
your
they were
answer.
inspired by genuine grievances on the part of
I
the
didn't
workers.
ask that question. I know you're very keen to answer questions which I haven't asked. I asked you a question that is capable of an answer. Would you agree that they were communist inspired? And let me remind you of your earlier answer, and I took you through the flourishing movements and strikes and so on, which you were good enough to agree. Let me remind you of that answer on oath and ask you this question. Would you agree that these were communist inspired?
On oath? No.
Thank you. You don't see a contradiction between this particular answer and your earlier answer when I
No.
referred you to what Pang
No.
Chon-pi said?
No.
Would you like to explain?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very much. So in the mid-1950s, what we see in Singapore is a widely diverse spectrum of anti-colonial activity, right? And these range very much from the Fabian socialists on the sort of, well, actually anti-colonial activity extends to the right. And we have very Fabian socialists in the sort of center-left, all the way to a wide range of radicals, anarchists. This is a period where there is a wide variety of ideas that are infecting people and about how to proceed. Now, the communists were one of this, and that people believed in communism in Singapore is that, you know, that's no doubt about that. But again, my argument is that there is no evidence of a underground, you know, after 1953-54, and particularly in the late 50s and into the early 60s of Operation Cold Store, there's no evidence of a sustained
We haven't got into Operation
underground
Cold Store yet.
communist.
We are dealing with 1950s.
Yes.
So you
I'm
restrict
just
your
saying.
answer to
I'm just saying. You're
1950s.
talking. You're asking whether the
Yes.
strikes were communist inspired.
Yes.
I'm saying that this is a colonial. Okay. So the reason
No,
why
so
the
your answer
strikes
is no,
happened.
and then you're
and-
explaining.
Yes. So
Yes.
yes. So the reasons why the strike happened is because this is a colonial economy with fundamental inequalities, right? This is a time period where there were very few labor protections for the workers.
Okay, I
and
don't
the
need
workers
all
had
that.
genuine
Can I stop you
grievances.
there?
Yes.
I think you have explained that they were not communist inspired, and you have given some reasons.
Yes.
We'll have that on the record. Now, so let's go back to what Fang Chong-pik had said and your answer earlier. This is tab 10A, page 122. It will come on. We read this sentence a few times. Over the years, the spectacular mass movements were in the main led by the basic level cadres of the student committee of the CPM. Now, I asked you about the spectacular mass movements, and you were good enough to agree that that included the various strikes in those periods. So I ask you again, would you now agree that based on your earlier answer, by reference to this particular passage from Fang Chon-pik, the strikes that we have just referred to in this book, Mr. Lee's book, Lee Teng-hui's book, were communist-inspired, led by the basic level cadres of the student committee. Agree? Disagree?
Disagree.
Thank you. Can I suggest to you that your answers are inconsistent and you can agree or disagree?
I disagree.
Thank you.
My answers are consistent.
Thank you. Now, you are aware that in 1961, Xi Jinping met with Deng Xiaoping, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yes.
think doesn't count as
Yes,
a...
yes.
Yes. And Deng told him about the armed struggle in Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia, and Vietnam, correct?
Well, I'm not familiar with the exact content of what they said, but I assume they must have discussed communist struggle, yes.
Are you aware of any writings on this matter?
I'm aware that there are writings.
Thank you. Can you mention one?
No,
You can't recall any.
not off the top of my head right now, no.
Thank you. Now, in 1959, the CPM had decided to give up armed struggle. You are aware of that.
Yeah, yes.
In 1961, at China's request, they agreed to reverse that decision and start armed struggle again. You are aware of that?
Yes.
Thank you. Just give me a few minutes. I will. You will have to bear with me reading this because we don't have it on the screen. Page 430 of Jinping. I'll read it out to you. Deng, this I'm reading from page 428. Okay. Deng opened the deliberations. This is the meeting in 1961 between Jinping and Deng Xiaoping. Southeast Asia, he informed us, was about to undergo monumental changes. We knew he was fresh from discussions with Ho Chi Minh. What he was telling us, I surmised, was based on his knowledge of Hanoi's intentions towards South Vietnam. Deng knew the minds and plans of the Burmese, Siamese, Lao, Cambodian, and Indonesian comrades who all maintained important training facilities in China at this time. Strategically, the whole region, Deng insisted, would become ripe for the sort of struggle we had been pursuing in Malaya for so long. CPM must not, he urged, switch policies at this point. We must take advantage of the opportunities that would soon be presenting themselves throughout Southeast Asia. I was momentarily taken aback. I can't decide this matter on the spot, I told the Chinese leader. This question must be determined by our central committee. Gathering my thoughts, I hastily added, if we were to revert back to armed struggle, what sort of assistance might we expect from China? And then the question of money came up. And he then says, psychologically, we now found ourselves in an even tougher position. In Sadao, we had suffered months of mental torment before finally coming to the conclusion that our one remaining hope of survival lay in the return to political struggle, despite the immediate pain this might mean. In private, I went over every detail of Deng's argument. For these deliberations, I brought in Xiao Chang, Chen Tian, Lia Tung, and he talks about it. He talks about Deng having been very persuasive, a little bit awkward about talking about money. Then he goes on at page 433. And he says, ironically, it was Musa Ahmad, the man we had elevated to the party chairmanship before Baling, who would ultimately betray us, who proved the most optimistic of all when it came to discussing Deng's proposal. With China's backing, we can take over Malaya in 5 years, he confidently predicted. I suggested an 8 to 10 year time frame might be more realistic, but I still harbored some doubts. Then he talked about some concerns, his lack of confidence that something might happen in Siam. And then at 434, he talks about going back to the Chinese and negotiations. And essentially, you must be aware that the Chinese agreed to finance the restart of armed struggle. Yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very successfully too, I guess, since Malaya was taken over by the Communist Party in 5 years. Oh no, wait, they weren't, were they? I'm sorry, my mistake.
Yes, I know that you can't resist some jokes now and then.
Life is short.
If I could add, the reason why they didn't succeed was because of Operation Cold Store. And perhaps that might...
Singapore isn't mentioned in there, remember?
Yes.
The Malayan Communist Party
You
did not have
know,
a
as
significant
well as I
presence
do,
below the causeway,
that
on our side of the
when
causeway.
CPM, when they refer to Malaya, are you disagreeing that they refer to Malaya and Singapore together?
No, they're referring to Malaya. Malaya refers to the entire peninsula, yes. But we've also established, through Jinping's own words, that they had no significant presence in Singapore.
No, we didn't establish that. But
Well, it was on the screen earlier.
Let me ask you. So your point is, whenever these statements are made, they're only by reference to Peninsula Malaya and not by reference to Singapore?
Jinping,
Now, I'm asking you a yes or no question.
well,
and then
those
you can
statements
explain.
that you just read out.
They are not by reference to Singapore.
That's impossible to say. I don't know what Jinping
Thank you.
actually means.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
So we should take that as the answer and not your earlier answer that that's not a reference to Singapore.
Well, my earlier answer was that the MCP, as established in what Jinping said earlier, did not have a significant presence in Singapore.
They had
He said specific. He used the word smashed, or was that you, Choi? Someone used the word smashed.
He
right?
also said,
Yes.
and have others, which were good enough to agree, including Fang Chuanpi, that they had spectacular successes in organizing
The
mass
anti-colonial
movements.
movement had spectacular successes.
Spectacular successes organized through their cadres in the Students' Committee of the CPM.
No, led in the main by the low-level cadres of the student committee. Please,
of
let's.
the CPM.
Yes, that's.
Thank you.
We accept that. Yes, led
Yes.
by the student cadres, not organized by the student cadres, not organized by the
I didn't ask
student
any of that.
committee. Led in the main by. No, I just want to be precise. That's the
Well,
sentence. Let's just stick with
No,
what exactly he wrote.
by saying that you want to be precise, we all can see what you're trying to do. You are trying to create a picture which is untrue. The fact is, when you are confronted with the direct statements, you have no choice but to agree. And Fang Chuanpi has said there was...
I have disagreed.
No, you didn't disagree with Fang Chuanpi. You disagreed with somebody else.
Which statement? You're not
Yes.
giving me much room. You're
I'm
just
not
asking
asking
yes/no
you
questions in a field which is all about
Dr.
nuance.
Thum, at this
Yes.
stage, I'm not asking you a question. I'm just
Yes.
telling you something. The transcript will be available. If I'm wrong, you will be able to say I'm wrong. But I'm just telling you that you had agreed
Mhm.
with the statement by Fang Chuanpi
Mhm.
about the success of the work of the student committee of the CPM in Singapore. Now, let's just take it from there, and we don't need to split hairs.
Let's
They
just
were
take note.
having success.
Is the transcript available right now, or only after this?
Well, the
So-
transcript, we can scroll back later on.
Okay.
But having agreed with that, now we are talking about Chinese funding of the CPM. You are good enough to agree that, well, you can't tell whether, that covers Peninsula Malaya only or whether it covers Peninsula Malaya and Singapore. So let's take it at that level. And
The Federation of Malaya, Peninsular Malaya already includes Singapore.
thank you.
Federation of Malaya and Singapore.
So thank you for that clarification. And so, may I suggest that your earlier attempt at a joke was inaccurate because, for the simple reason that the money from China was going to be used in their mind for armed struggle in Peninsular Malaya and Singapore, because they looked at it as one entity. And the only reason, and you don't have to agree, I'm just telling you, only reason it didn't succeed, one of the reasons it didn't succeed was Operation Cold Store. But I know you disagree, but since you make an attempt at a joke, I think I should say that to you. You are aware that Jinping discussed with Yu Chuyip in Beijing in 1961 about Singapore. Are you aware of that?
Yes?
Thank you. The discussion centered on how to protect the communist underground activists in Singapore, correct?
Yes, yeah.
And how to preserve the communist underground in Singapore, correct?
Yes?
And they feared a crackdown, correct?
Yes, you're asking me for specific details now.
No, I'm just asking you
if I'm
whether
aware
you
of this.
agree. They feared a crackdown.
Well, I
The
would,
communists.
you're asking, I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head every single thing that is, that they are recorded
Well,
to
these
have
are all
discussed.
major developments.
Mhm.
I'm simply asking you, as a person who says that you are done detailed research in this area,
Mhm.
whether you're aware that Jinping and Yu Chuyip were fearing a crackdown on the communist underground in Singapore when they
Yes, of
discussed.
course.
Thank
They
you.
had been cracked down. There have been lots of crackdowns,
Yes.
constant crackdowns.
And they planned to sabotage the Malaysia plan and to keep Singapore separate.
Mhm.
Yes?
That's an interesting question. I can't remember that statement off the top of my head. So if you have a source for that, I'd appreciate seeing
Right.
it. Yeah.
So sitting there as a historian who has done detailed work in this area,
Mhm.
you do not, off the top of your head, remember anything that suggests that Yu Chuyip and Jinping discussed and agreed to plan to sabotage the Malaysia plan.
No, not off the top of my head. But I would be very grateful for the opportunity for you to refresh my memory.
All right. Let's look at what Jinping says. Page 436 and 437. If you see at the bottom, senior Singapore communist leader Yu Chuyip, as we called him, traveled to China from his headquarters in exile in Riau Islands shortly after the arrival in Peking. Now, over the page, let's look at the third paragraph, I think the second paragraph. Our Peking meeting also examined in detail the Malaysia plan that was being hatched between London and Kuala Lumpur. The three of us came to the conclusion that it would be in the best interest of our party, the Communist Party, if we plotted to sabotage this. So does that help you remember?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It's quite surprising that something as important as this has escaped your memory.
Well, nobody's perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't for a minute suggest that you are completely perfect, but I expected you to be more perfect than most of us in this field.
More perfect than most. Okay, well,
In this field.
thank you. You have a very high opinion of me, and so I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the reason for the high opinion is that you said that you are someone who has done detailed research and work in this field. And I would have thought a plan by the Communist Party of Malaya to sabotage the Malaysia plan would have been something very significant that a historian will remember, but we will take it that you don't, and we will move on.
And I just point out there are no citations on that page either.
Thank you. You expect them to keep a record and then for Chin Ping to say, refer to the minutes of meeting held on X date, X month in 1961 between Yu Chuyup and myself, and here are the notes. Do you expect that?
No, but the special branch did keep a record, and so that's the
This was
citations
taking place
that I
in
used.
Peking, and as far as
Yes.
I know, in 1961, the special branch wasn't that active in
No,
Peking.
I'm not saying special branch was at that meeting. I'm saying that there is no evidence, for example, that the detainees of Operation
we'll
Cold
come
Store
to
were
that.
involved.
I'm now
so
talking
evidence,
about-
right? We are driven by evidence. Chin Ping is one source. He says something. We take it into account in our broader
Right.
consideration of all the sources. But it really helps if you have evidence for what you're saying.
Dr. Thum, for the
And-
time
yes.
being, we are talking about the plan that was hatched, and I think we have evidence from the Secretary General of CPM, and I think for the time being, it's enough to note that you don't recall it. Now, can I take it that you haven't interrogated this particular point either, in the way that you talked about earlier?
You can take it that I consider Chin Ping an unreliable source.
Thank you. Now, so you will discount pretty much everything that he says?
No, I didn't say that. I said
No,
I
unreliable
take-
source.
Unreliable source doesn't mean he's totally wrong.
Right. So
Right.
you would apply
It
your
means
mind
that
to...
you have to take him in consideration with all the other sources,
Right.
including special branch documents, for
So the
example.
question I asked you is, can I take it that you haven't interrogated this particular sentence and point? I mean, you didn't even remember it.
Yeah.
Thank
You can
you.
take that. Yes.
Now, do you know that Chin Ping decided to get the Singapore Underground to work on splitting the PAP? Are you aware of that?
Do I know when Chin Ping decided
No.
to? Sorry, I didn't get the
Whether he
question.
decided to get the Singapore Communists underground to work on splitting the PAP.
I know that Chin Ping made a lot of decisions that had very little impact on Singapore.
That wasn't the question I asked, so I'll try again.
Please do.
Do you know whether Chin Ping decided to get the Singapore Communist underground to work on splitting the PAP? Yes or no? I'm asking whether you know.
I think that, let me think. I can't recall off the top of my head.
You can't recall.
Yes, I can't recall.
It's not an important enough fact in your mind.
Chin Ping is not a major player in Singapore because the MCP does not have a major presence in Singapore during this time.
You
It's
didn't
more
even know that the cadres from Malaya had come down to Singapore. So, you keep making these statements. Chin Ping's...
Well, are we going to cite anything from the ISD, from Special Branch? Because a lot of my work is based on their sources, right, and their reports. And there, I do not recall
Let's-
anything in their documents saying that, these 10 people out of over 1 million in Singapore had a major impact,
Right.
right?
No, I think the major impact we have dealt with and crossed the bridge, unless you want to recross again and say that what you said earlier was not true. So let's not go back to that.
We didn't connect those 10 people with the broader mass
No,
movements.
I
We
wa- I
simply
wasn't-
accepted that 10 people came to
I
Singapore
didn't seek to
according
connect
to
those
Chin
10
Ping.
people. The
Okay,
10
great.
people,
Thank you.
the point on the 10 people
Yes.
was the fact that you didn't even know that happened. And you didn't even, register that. That's the only point. So it's not being suggested that there are only 10 communists in Singapore,
No,
or
no.
that they all came from Peninsula Malaya. If Chin Ping is right, the communists had an underground movement in Singapore. They infiltrated many organizations. They worked with the PAP. And the CPM worked on splitting the PAP. Would you agree that if he is right, all of those things are correct too? I mean, based on what he says.
If he is right,
Thank you.
if
But you disagree with him on each of those points.
Okay, which points exactly now?
Okay.
Right.
You disagree with him that the communists had an underground movement in Singapore?
Wait, are we going to go through the yes-no thing again, or can I nuance my answer?
Well, we are going to start with a yes and no, and then you can give an explanation.
Okay. The communists did not have a sustained underground conspiracy in Singapore in
I didn't
the
ask
late
that.
50s.
I asked you whether the communists had an underground movement in Singapore. Do you agree with Chin Ping when he says that? You can say no.
Okay, no.
Thank you. So the communists did not have an underground movement in Singapore. That's your evidence as a historian sitting here. Right?
Okay, I need to
No,
clarify,
you
to
can-
nuance the answer, right? Because these are
Dr.
very
Thum,
complicated
Dr. Thum.
terms.
It's actually very simple.
No, it's not.
The question is, did they have an underground movement in Singapore? Whether
Again,
it is
we
strong,
come back to
whether,
my initial question, way
Let
back
me
when we
finish,
started.
please.
Define the movement.
I'm just going to put it that way, and I'm going to leave it to you to say yes or no, or you can say I don't know to answer the question. The question is, the communists had an underground movement. You can say yes, you can say no, you can say I don't know, and then you can explain.
Okay, then my answer is no.
Thank you. Now, would you agree? So,
Do I get to explain? You
yes,
said I could explain.
of course.
Yes, of course. Well, so it really depends, as I said, on how you define movement, and this is very complicated. According to special branch records, there was no sustained communist underground conspiracy after 53, 54 or so, because it had been heavily smashed. Chin Ping himself agrees with that the Singapore Town Committee was heavily smashed. So in the sense that there is, if you're thinking about as an underground movement of people, conspirators connecting with each other, no, that does not exist. Are there individual communists? Yes. Are there people who believe in communism? Yes.
Dr. Thum, you have said all of these things several times.
Yes.
If this is your explanation, we don't need to go into it.
Okay.
We went through this exchange, and I suggested to you that your answers were inconsistent with what you had given a little bit earlier, and we can leave it at that.
And respectfully, I disagreed with you.
I know.
Yes.
Right. The record will speak for itself.
Yes, it will. The
Now-
truth will always come out.
The Can I refer you to something that Aloysius Chin has said, which I'm sure you're aware of, page 72. I don't know that we have it on the transcript, but we will try and have it out. Aloysius Chin, the Communist Party of Malaya. In the interest of time, let me read it out to you. Okay. The object, this is from the bottom of page 72, the object of the CUF, Communist United Front in Peninsular Malaya, was defined in a secret CPM directive which stated the progressive forces should formulate plans and make arrangements to assign cadres and party members to infiltrate factories, mines, villages, streets, schools, and people of all strata, use all kinds of ways and means to unite and organize the broad masses, and assign personnel to join all kinds of public bodies, take part in them with the aim of seizing control so that the party and the people will have extensive contact, and therein press on with the efforts to recruit party members and continually expand party organization. The leading organs of progressive forces from the highest to the lowest should mix cleverly with central parties and factions, adopt various ways and means to initiate joint action and form a united front with them on matters of common interest. Furthermore, they should endeavor to join up with the commercial, cultural, and student circles in waging a common struggle so as to form a powerful force to fight the reactionaries on these issues and therein to strive to win over the people. Are you aware of this secret CPM directive?
It's not very secret.
So you are aware of
I'm
the
aware,
directive.
I'm aware. Yes, yes.
Right. Now, that was their plan for Peninsular Malaya and Singapore. Agree?
Yes.
And that was certainly referring to the period after 1952.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I want you to look at some things that have been said about the anti-British League, which we talked about very much earlier in your evidence.
Yes.
Let's look at Wong Sun Fong. Does his name strike a bell for you?
Are you referring to the former secretary, not secretary, the Wong Sun Fong? The name definitely rings a bell. Let me look him up.
A member of ABL and a member of the Communist Party of Malaya. Does that help you?
That describes a lot of people, but sure, go on. Yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah.
Now, he was in ABL in 1953-54 and became a member of the Communist Party of Malaya in 1957. And he was part of the PAP, elected into the Legislative Assembly as a PAP candidate in
Yes.
1959.
Yes.
He was one of the 13 who left the PAP in 1961 to form the Barisan Socialists.
Yes.
Are you aware of that?
Yes, yes.
And he escaped arrest in 1963.
Yes.
He fled to Singapore. He fled Singapore to go over to Indonesia
Yes.
and later joined the CPM underground.
Does your record reflect what Yu Choi Yip said to him when he arrived in Riyadh?
Well, I'm just putting this to you. You can agree, disagree, and then if you wish, if you think the answer needs an explanation, you can
Okay.
suggest. So I'm just asking you whether you're aware that he fled to Indonesia and joined the CPM underground.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you. And he ended up in the Peace Village in Betong, reserved for former CPM members, correct?
Yes, yes. I think he's in the documentary To Singapore with Love.
Now, this is what he says, the memoirs of Wong Sun Fong. Are you aware of these memoirs?
Yes,
You have read them?
yes.
Thank you. He says, in the 1950s, the underground organization in Singapore was Anti-British League. This was an anti-colonial progressive organization that we had access to. Do you agree with that statement?
The Anti-British League was an underground anti-colonial organization. Oh, it's there.
That we had access to.
Yes.
You agree with that? Have you heard of Zhonghua?
Sorry, that's I'm not sure.
Former Malayan ABL member. Doesn't strike a bell?
Doesn't strike a bell, no.
Thank you. Zhonghua says, in the book Preliminary Study of the History of Singapore People's Anti-British League, and I quote, it's in Chinese. I assume you haven't read this, right?
No, not Zhonghua's book, yes.
It was generally believed that as a peripheral underground organization led by the CPM Singapore Committee lead agency, its objective and aim should be to win over and organize people from all sectors of Singapore under the leadership of CPM to enlarge the anti-British United Front in coordination with the development of the armed struggle in the mainland to overthrow the British colonial rule of Malaya and to establish the People's Republic of Malaya, but not to strive for the eventual realization of a communist socialist society. That is to say, members of the Anti-British League could qualify to be further absorbed as members of the CPM only after they have acquired the class consciousness to fight for the liberation of all mankind and the lifelong strife for communism and upon appraisal of their strife. Are you aware of these statements? No.
No, but I am now.
Yes. Based on what he says, which of course you were not aware before, if what he says is accurate, ABL was a satellite organization of the CPM?
Could we scroll back up, please?
Sure.
Yes, the ABL was, which is, wait, sorry, what was the question?
Based on what he says, and if what he
Yes.
says is accurate, ABL was a satellite organization of the CPM. It's straightforward based on what he says.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's not controversial. Mr. Chairman, may I have a minute? I actually had a meeting at 4 o'clock. May I text the person I was supposed to meet to tell them
Sure.
that I'm still? Thank
Please
you.
proceed.
Thank
Dr.
you very
Thum, if
much.
it's very important, you need us also to confirm to whoever it is that you're indisposed at the moment.
Well, I did warn them in advance that
Thank you.
it
Thank you.
might take
So
a
let's
while.
carry on.
Thank
then.
you for
Yes,
understanding.
let's
Please
please.
carry
Let me show you another document. Now, Zhou Guang, Comrade D, whom you're aware of, correct?
That's, yes.
Yes.
Ng Ming Chiang.
Yes.
He has a number of aliases.
First anti-British League group in Singapore Chinese High School. He has written something in the mainstays of the anti-colonial movement, legendary figures of the Singapore People's Anti-British League. I assume you haven't read this either. This was in Mandarin.
It depends. I have read some articles in Mandarin, some memoirs, but
Okay.
not.
But this particular one you haven't read.
No, I don't think so. Do you have the title?
Well, it's the same book as the earlier book when I referred you to, what's his name now? Wong Sun Fong. But the title of the article, First Anti-British League Group in Singapore Chinese High School. The title of the book is Mainstays of the Anti-Colonial Movement, Legendary Figures of the Singapore People's Anti-British League in Mandarin.
Okay, thank you. No, I don't believe I've read that.
Thank you. Now, Comrade D, just to get this clear, was a member of the three-man CPM cell formed in 1957 to direct CPM activities in Singapore. You are aware of that?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, let's look at the English translation. Under the harsh underground conditions of the time, the ABL was set up precisely to meet the demands of strengthening the anti-British independence struggle, safeguarding the core leadership of the party, enlarging the organization of the party, and expanding its influence. To advance from ABL member to a CPM member, potential candidates have to go through different stages of stringent tests, and he sets out how they then become members. But essentially, the first paragraph, safeguarding the ABL was set up to meet the demands of strengthening the anti-British independence struggle, safeguarding the core leadership of the party, enlarging the organization of the party, and expanding its influence. If what Zhou Gang says is correct, then again that simply confirms what Wong Sun Fong had said earlier, and ABL was a satellite organization. Correct?
Yes, the existence of the ABL is not controversial. It existed, it had members,
Thank you.
and it had many members, many of whom were not communists and others who were.
Right. Now, So, when I asked you earlier, and if necessary later on, when we can, we will go back to the transcript. Remember, we started out this discussion and we referred to page 5 of your ARI paper. And I read to you your statement that there is lack of evidence. It's clear that there is no evidence or lack of evidence of communism in the progressive left. And I said, by reference to what Mr. Lee had said, he referred to ABL, that you would include the ABL in your statement, and you said yes. That answer is not accurate. Would you agree?
Sorry, I was looking up what you're quoting. Could you repeat the question, please?
Look at the paragraph, the top paragraph in page 5 of your ARI
yes.
paper. See, the historiography is clear on the lack of evidence of communism.
Yes.
Remember, I asked you some questions when we first started out,
Yes.
and I said, this, you are referring to the progressive left, and then we went to identify which organizations were part of the progressive left that you are referring to.
And we had
And
a
I
very
took you through to what Mr. Lee had said,
right.
Barisan Socialist, ABL, trade unions, students' unions. And I said, so these would all be part of the progressive left that you consider.
Mm-hmm.
And in your view, there's no evidence. I mean, putting those questions together, in your view, there's no evidence of communists in these organizations, based on the records you have seen.
Yes, there's no evidence of communism as in the special branch files, as I've said
I know.
repeatedly.
So now you see this evidence that contradicts what you said to us earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, ABL was a satellite organization set up to strengthen the core of the party and carry out its activities. Would you agree?
Yeah, sure, yes. Yes.
Thank you.
But I still feel there's no evidence of communism, right? We're clear on that, right?
Well,
Yep.
I don't know how you can say that in the face of what these two gentlemen have said, Wong Sun Fong and Shao Gang. One says it was set up precisely to safeguard the core leadership of the party and enlarging the organization of the party and expanding its influence. And Wong Sun Fong says underground organization in Singapore was the ABL, which they had access to. Mm-hmm. And Zhou Chonghua says that it was a peripheral underground organization led by the CPM to win over, and he says all those things. And I asked you, it was a satellite organization of the CPM, and you said yes. I mean, of course, you haven't seen this material before, but having looked at it, you are good enough to say it was a satellite organization of the CPM.
Yes, that's not controversial.
That's not controversial.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not controversial that there were communists within the ABL.
Nope.
And if so, I will just suggest to you that I will get the precise transcript later on, but your earlier answers given to me right at the beginning of this discussion on ABL were inaccurate.
Nope.
And
Will I get a chance to explain, or are we just going yes, no still?
well, I think it's quite clear, and I don't think we want to keep going back to the same thing over and over again.
Can I just point out, since we're referring to what I said earlier, I did point out that the ABL, according to Special Branch, was completely pretty much useless right from the beginning. I have some quotes here from Special Branch documents, if you'd like me to read them into the record.
You can give it to us, but that still doesn't explain your answer earlier. And rather than arguing in vacuo, I'll show you the answers a bit later. Let's move on. Now, let's look at some additional material. This is interview given by Chin Peng to Professor Reed Professor Reid, as you know, is a distinguished Australian scholar of Southeast Asia. You're aware of that?
Tony Reid is a friend, yes.
Yes. I didn't ask you whether he was a friend. I asked you
Yes.
whether he was a distinguished scholar.
Oh, yes, he's a very distinguished scholar.
Thank you.
Yes.
If you look at the discussion between Thum Ping and Professor Reid, so the so-called plan met with Lee Kuan Yew to explain, this is by reference to the 1957 attempt by the pro-communists, was not our party decision, not the superior's decision. That was a spontaneous move by the rank and file. Many of them are not party members. They are former ABL members. Anthony Reid, so you're saying that the party's policy right through to 1961 was to support Lee Kuan Yew. Thum Ping, yes. Was that a mistake when looking back on it? In our party, there are still some differences, so I can't give you any answer. We haven't resolved this. Can you tell us the reason why you thought it was a good policy to support Lee Kuan Yew? And then he gives an answer. And he approached us and so on, and we sent some members. That's why we sent some of our party members, some very close to our party, to help them, including Samar Ismail and the Indian Devan Nair. That's Thum Ping's account, and I don't think that's very controversial, correct?
No. So what?
And the
somebody-
PAP had
yes.
communists at Mr. Lee's own request, essentially.
Yes.
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 And Mr. Lee recalled this in his Battle for Merger talks in 1961. But I don't need to go through everything he said. But essentially, he said that he acted for someone who was released subsequently in 1953 from detention and became friends, and that was Samar Ismail. And he's still a most important communist cadre spreading propaganda on behalf of the communist cause. And then he came to know of Devan Nair, and they became comrades. And essentially, Thum Ping's account of how the PAP came to be formed, and Thum Ping's account was given in 2004, essentially is similar to Mr. Lee's account given more than 40 years earlier in 1961 on how the PAP came to be formed. Would you agree?
Similar, yes.
Thank you. From the CPM's perspective, the PAP was another open front organization to influence. Would you agree? It's fairly straightforward.
Another open front organization to influence. Yeah, sure, yes.
Thank you. Now let's look at some British records. 28th of August 1959, I'm sure you're aware of these. This is an Internal Security Council meeting. Paragraph 29. The chairman said the matter was crucial to the whole of the security situation. Experts' reports which he had been seeing suggested that post-events were repeating themselves. The same leaders were at work. There were the same building up in their strength, and they seemed to be getting into a position from which they could challenge the government's authority. In the past, this trend had been met by force. It was disturbing to see circumstances repeating themselves, with the horrid prospect of further force and bloodshed occurring. Would it not be wise to intervene now and crush the monster before it got too big? Why was not this right course now? You are aware of that?
Oh, am I aware of? Yes, of course.
Yes, of course.
This is, can I ask the exact date of this?
This was the 28th of August, 1959.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if, and this is the if, Thum Ping was right in what I had shown you earlier, that he could move the masses in Singapore, and the election victory in 1959 of the PAP was in a substantial measure due to the CPM's influence over the masses, then based on what the chairman of this Internal Security Council was saying, the threat was real, wasn't it? If Jinping was right.
The chairman said that this map was crucial to the whole of the The experts' reports on the post-events were repeating themselves. The same leaders were at work. There was similar strength in the I'm sorry, what was the question?
If Jinping was right in what he has said in his book, that the CPM had influence over the masses in Singapore, and the PAP victory of 1959 was in a significant measure due to that influence. If that is correct, then what the chairman was saying here was a cause for concern. Would you agree?
If Jinping is right, then these are very disconnected. What the chairman is saying here,
It's not
I mean,
disconnected. Let me explain to you.
He doesn't use the word communist or communism in this paragraph.
Right.
I'm not sure what is exactly he's referring to.
Okay, what do you understand by that paragraph? Maybe you can tell us.
Singapore.
It must be, you must know this back of your hand. You say you've read all these records.
There were brothers together in the union.
Yeah. It's fairly straightforward, isn't it, what he says?
Hold on a second.
Not exactly. Let's go through sentence by sentence.
Okay.
The experts' reports which he had been seeing suggested that the past events were repeating themselves. The same leaders were at work. You understand that?
This is in reference to what exactly? The security situation?
Okay, let me ask you another question. Can I take it that you hadn't applied your mind to this document?
There are thousands of documents.
No, it's a
I can't-
question that I'm asking about an August 1959 document.
August 1959.
Can I
Is
take
this,
it that you haven't applied
sorry,
your mind?
clarification. This document, is it, it's an Internal Security Council
Yes,
minute, and so the chairman is William Good.
yes.
Yes, that's an interesting
Let me-
question, because I'm not sure. I'm not sure they are, or rather, I haven't seen this. There's 4 or 5 council meetings in where the minutes don't seem to be available. So, did you get this from the British Archive? If so, I would love to go through these. Or are they from Singapore?
Let me ask you this question.
Yes.
Do you recall reading this before?
This is, if it's ISC 1959, no. No, I don't think I have seen the minutes. I have not been able to locate the minutes for the first few Internal Security Council meetings. The declassified documents, as far as I can remember, start with Selkirk in February 1960.
Okay.
So if you can give me this and it changes the story, I would definitely embrace having a look
Okay.
at these documents.
So let's just read this first. Look, you know the period, you know what he is saying.
Yes.
If you wanted the context, if you look at para 28, there was no open conflict in SGEU between the communist and the anti-MCP elements. They were all brothers together in the union seeking the same ends. The conflict would not arise until the MCP supporters chose to use trade unions for their political ends. And then he says, matter was crucial, but to the whole security situation. Experts' reports, which he had been seeing, suggested that past events were repeating themselves and same leaders were at work. It's quite obvious to you, even reading it for the first time, what that means, correct?
appears to refer to the broader anti-colonial movement and revival of the anti-colonial movement against the British.
There was the same building up in their strength, and they seem to be getting into a position from which they could challenge the government's authority. You can understand that, right?
Yes, the anti-colonial movement is
Right.
building up its strength after the election of the PAP.
And in the past, this trend had been met by force. It was disturbing to see circumstances repeating themselves with
Yes.
the horrid prospect of further force and bloodshed occurring.
Yes,
Now-
the force was from the British, the colonial government, which violently suppressed the anti-colonial movement.
Right. So in your view, this is the anti-colonial movement which had nothing to do with the communists, correct?
No, the communists were also anti-colonial,
Yes.
right? You know, like the vast
So
majority of the population
Then
was anti-colonial.
let's then stick to this. Would you agree that the building up of strength that is being referred to includes the building up of strength of the communists?
It was the stated policy of the communists to build up their strength.
Thank
sure.
you.
But whether he's referring to it here, I don't
Yes.
know. I'll need to see the full document. I would,
Right.
If you can release these documents, I would really appreciate it.
Let's look at this point, which I made to you. In the context of what the chairman was saying, Sir William Good, if the leaders were building up, including the communists, and assuming the communists were using open front tactics, and assuming Thum Ping was right that they could move the masses,
Oh, sorry, you're doing, I thought you were reading. Sorry,
no,
you're doing
assuming
hypotheticals.
that Thum Ping was
assuming-
right in moving the masses, then the threat of the communists moving to challenge the government using the masses and using these build-ups was real. If Thum Ping was correct, reading
Well-
it in this context.
Again, you're asking me if yes,
Yes,
sure.
thank you. But you
again-
disagree with Thum Ping?
Well, evidence, special branch. You know, we've
Thank
been
you.
over this. Yes, there is no evidence that
Yes.
the detainees of Cold Store were involved in any communist conspiracy.
Right. Now,
I'm glad you
that's
accept
not
that.
the question. The question is about the CPM. If you want to make a separate point that those who detained under Operation Cold Store were not communists, that's a separate point. The point I'm focusing on was the communist underground in Singapore, their influence and their role, and if Thum Ping is right that they could move the masses, so much so to even win the elections for the PAP, then the chairman's concerns were serious and valid. It's a simple question.
The CPM did not have the power to move the masses.
Yeah,
We know
so
this,
I'm asking you if Thum Ping was correct.
but he's not.
Okay, but if he is correct, then the chairman's concerns are serious.
But he's not.
Right. But assume for the time being he is. Would you agree as a matter of logic?
Why assume in particular that Thum Ping is
I
correct?
think the fact that you don't want to assume and
Because
answer
he's
the
not.
question, Dr. Thum, says a lot, but
yes,
let's
it does,
move on.
doesn't it?
Let's move on to March 1965. Manifesto of the Malayan National Liberation League, Central Committee. You know what the Malayan National Liberation League is, right?
Yes, yes.
Right. Look at well, I'll put the document up. That's the political wing of the CPM, wasn't it?
The political wing of the CPM? I think it was a bit broader than that.
What is it?
It's a collection of anti-colonial forces.
Would it include the communist forces?
Yes, yeah, sure.
Now, let's look at the language it uses.
Can I ask the date of this document?
The date of this document. I gave it to you, the 15th of March, 1965.
Right, thank you.
Have you seen this document before?
No, I don't believe I have. No.
All right. During the last few years, I'm trying to make sure that you will have the paragraph I want. Yeah, it's a fourth paragraph. During the last few years, inspired by the long and persistent armed struggle of the National Liberation Army, our people's struggle for genuine independence, democracy, peace, and the reunification of the Malay Peninsula with Singapore has made further headway, while the National Liberation Movement of the people of North Kalimantan has gained momentum and taken the course of armed struggle. Would you now agree that the MNLL is the political wing of the CPM? The language is obvious.
The language of anti-colonialism was common to many left-wing forces of the period. I don't think it's possible for me to conclude at this point, particularly since the document is dated March 1965, and my papers that you are referring to specifically cover 53 to 63.
So you do not know of 65?
We can have a separate discussion.
No, I'm asking you whether you know of the period after 63.
I have worked on the period after 63 in the context of Singapore's integration, its politics within Malaysia.
Right.
Because by that time, the Malayan Communist Party was not much of a factor in domestic politics.
Right. And looking at this document, you will not agree. Have you heard of the Malayan National Liberation League?
I've heard it referred to, yes.
Okay. Have you heard it referred to as the political wing of the CPM?
No.
And looking at it, language.
The language is common to anti-colonial left-wing movements throughout the region, indeed throughout the world. So it's impossible to say.
During the last few years, inspired by the long and persistent armed struggle of the National Liberation Army, what National Liberation Army were they referring to?
I assume the Malayan Communist Party.
Thank you. During the last few years, inspired by the long and persistent armed struggle of the National Liberation Army, our people's struggle for genuine independence, democracy, peace, and the reunification of the Malay Peninsula with Singapore has made further headway, while the National Liberation Movement of the people of North Kalimantan has gained momentum and taken the course of armed struggle. You would still deny that this is not on the face of it clear that it's a document referring to the communist liberation movement?
It's referring to the communist, to the
And
CPM,
the
yes.
MNLL, you would say, as far as you know, you have no reason to conclude that it's a political wing of the CPM.
I said it was more complicated than that. I think, if I recall correctly,
Okay,
there was a
let me
collection
then
of
phrase it.
anti-colonial forces.
Do you believe that it was linked to the CPM in any way?
I think I can't comment on that. That falls outside my area of expertise.
So you have no idea?
About the, what's it?
MNLL?
MNLL. I'm aware of it, but it is not part of my expertise.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now, you know, let me just show you what some things that some historians have said. If you look at the historians, Lee Ting Hui, Turnbull, Drysdale, Richard Clutterbuck, all of whom I assume you would be aware of,
Yes.
all refer to the,
Sorry, Drysdale is not a historian.
I stand corrected. All of them refer to the Malayan Communist Party, the United Front policy in the 1950s, and the influence that these United Front movements had on the ground.
And all
You-
of them published before the declassification
Right.
of British documents in 2013.
So you're aware of their writings, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, what the CPM leaders have said that we have looked at, starting with the Secretary General, if what they say is true, then there was a strong and powerful Communist United Front in Singapore, as confirmed by several scholars who have studied the matter. Though, as you point out, they did their work before the declassification. Okay, so put that in parentheses. We accept that their publications were before the declassification. But if you look at what the CPM leaders, not just the Secretary General, but starting with the Secretary General, but Fang Chuanpi and others have said, is corroborated by what these historians, as well as Drysdale, says about the powerful Communist United Movement Front in Singapore in the 1950s. Agree?
Again, Mr. Shanmugam, you start with if and assume that
Yes.
if they are correct.
Yes.
I said, and I've already given my position on that.
Right. So it is impossible for you to answer a question based on certain assumptions.
The assumption is as I point out, is heavily flawed.
Right. But we can see that on the face of it, the published records of historians coincide with what the communist leaders have said. Would you
So
at least agree?
Are you saying historians like Turnbull, Clutterbuck, and Lee Ting Hui?
Yes.
Well, you have not shown Turnbull or Clutterbuck, and Lee Ting Hui. We had that discussion where I pointed out the nuances of his.
Let me
of
come
what he
back.
wrote.
I haven't shown you.
Okay.
I don't think I want to show you all of it. I assume you have read it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just saying to you, and you can disagree if you disagree,
Mm-hmm.
the works of Drysdale, Clutterbuck,
Sorry,
Turnbull.
Drysdale's not a historian.
You did make that point. I just now said the works.
Okay.
The
My
works of
apologies.
Richard Clutterbuck, Drysdale, Turnbull, and Lee Ting Hui corroborate, or let me not use the word corroborate. Their works are similar, what they say is similar to what the leaders of the CPM have said. Correct?
Let's
Which
see.
I've shown you.
Clutterbuck works more on.
No, I mean,
the
first, can you
C-
agree or disagree, and then we can-
Disagree.
You disagree.
Yes.
Explain why.
Okay, so Clutterbuck, I think his work focuses a lot more on the security dimensions of the MCP, and including north of the Causeway, and during the heights of the emergency, right? He does not focus specifically on the political aspects of Singapore's anti-colonial independence struggle.
Well,
Mary Turnbull,
I didn't talk about that either.
but you're asking me whether they agree.
No,
And
I didn't say
I'm-
that. Okay, let me frame you this, please. The CPM leaders that we have seen say there was a large scale, they had influence with the masses, and they could move the masses. And there were,
But they couldn't.
they had influence, and a number of activities were carried out with success using their communist cadres. The simple point to you is what these people say is similar in that there was a mass movement which was successful in organizing activities and inspired by the communists. It's a simple question. You can agree or disagree.
I disagree. That's not
Thank you.
what Mary says.
Right.
Sorry, Professor Turnbull.
Does any of them say that, in your view? Or none of them says that?
Oh, okay. So we have to take them individually and go
Right.
through exactly what they say.
I don't need for you to go through exactly what they say. You can take them individually and tell me whether you agree or disagree.
So your three clauses were mass movements, Then what was the second one? And the third one was inspired by the communists.
Yes.
What was the second clause?
Well, let's just make it easier for you. Mass
Okay.
movement inspired by the communists.
Mass movement, yes. Inspired by the communists. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean the communists controlled it? Does that mean the communists led it? Does it mean it was organized by the communists? Or does it mean that they were inspired by the example of the MCP as an anti-colonial, as a leading anti-colonial party, and also its resistance to the Japanese? So can I clarify inspired? What does that mean?
Over the years, spectacular mass movements were in the main led by basic level cadres of the Communist Party. Take that to be the definition.
Led by cadres, but not, so it does not include organized by the Communist Party. It does not include any sort of coordinated action by the Communist Party.
Not yet, yes, led by the cadres.
So it is possible that Communist Party, that communists and communist sympathizers and fellow travelers, and I mean, no, we know that, there were people in the anti-colonial movement who believed in communism. Yes.
I think, again, you have gotten out of answering the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the question again?
I'm sure you are well aware of the question, but let me ask you again. The CPM leaders say the mass movements were successful and were led by communist cadres.
And they're wrong.
Would you agree?
Well, I disagree, as I said.
No, I didn't ask. I haven't finished the question.
Oh, okay.
Would you
You
agree
did say would I agree? Okay, sorry,
that-
my apologies.
what has been written by these gentlemen, and you can take them individually, says something similar? Each of them.
That,
First of all, let's take Lee Ting-hui.
yes.
What's your answer?
So does he say that the mass movements were inspired by the communists?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be a
Fair representation.
Yes, his book was published
What
in
about Turnbull?
1996. Turnbull, interestingly enough, backs away from that position. In her earlier work, she so it depends on which edition you're reading, but in her later work, In the Face of New Evidence, she backed significantly away from-
2009.
Yes, so yes. She
Among the
consulted
things
me
she
on
says,
that book.
Malayan Communist Party revived United Front policy in '54, set out to infiltrate open organizations, notably Chinese schools and labor unions.
Mhm.
ABL quickly expanded, numbering more than 2,000 members by 1954. That's in summary what she says. There are many
Okay.
other things she says.
They set out to do that, yes. And the ABL had, had significant numbers. Whether they were able to do anything with them,
Okay,
special
let's
branch
move on to
disagrees.
Drysdale.
I'd rather
What's your
not.
view?
Drysdale is not a historian, and his work is
Okay,
not
let's move on.
historically reliable.
What about Clutterbuck?
Clutterbuck, as I mentioned, is a security expert. And if I remember correctly, he focuses
He
very
says
much
party
on the
structure
security.
under town committee in line with the main front organizations, trade unions, women's organizations, Democratic Youth League. Does that help you?
Sorry, repeat that?
Party
Please.
structure under town committee in line with the main front organizations. This is my summary of what he says. Trade unions, women's organizations, the Democratic Youth League. Does that help you?
So he's saying the party organization includes all these things?
He didn't say that.
Sorry, then I
says that-
misunderstood you.
These are all infiltrated by the communists.
Infiltrated, in what year?
In the 1950s.
Well, again, it depends.
You are not aware of what he says? You haven't
I'm
read his
aware
book?
of what he said. You're summarizing what he's saying, right? But what part of the book are you reading in reference
Okay.
to? There's a lot of it.
Let's take post-1955.
Post 1955.
Yes.
Yes. There were communist cadres. Sorry, not cadres. There were communists in these organizations. Yes, we don't deny, but they were not part of some sort of structure, party structure,
So
reporting to anyone. Or as far as we know, there's no evidence in the special branch
All right.
files of that.
So your point is the CPM had its cadres in all these places.
No. My point is that there were communists, not that they were CPM cadres, not that they were actively taking instructions from the CPM. You mentioned Wong Soon Fong, for example, and he actually went against CPM orders because he wasn't aware of them, which is one of the examples I use in my work, which points out that CPM issued orders and they were not followed by people that we know to be communists.
Right.
So, in fact, in many instances, they went directly against the communist instructions,
Right.
Including in 1961 with the PAP split, because there was the standing instruction at the time was.
Can we keep to the question?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So let me come back. Your point is there are communists in all these organizations. They were involved in these mass actions. However, the CPM was not organizing them, and there was no open quote conspiracy, close quotes, correct?
Yeah, that seems reasonable, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And,
not to say that they were rife with communists. I'm saying there were, I'm not saying like 90% of these organizations were communists. We know of, specifically 1, 2, 3 people here and there.
Yes.
Yes.
And at the same time, you're quite happy to agree to this statement. Over the years, the spectacular mass movements were in the main led by basic level cadres of the student committee. You're quite happy to agree to that statement. So I'll just suggest to you that you are finding every which way when you're confronted with something that you cannot disagree with, then you agree. Otherwise, you're finding every possible avenue to just stating what is obviously true. You can agree or disagree, and we'll move on.
Wait, are you asking me to agree or disagree to your accusation?
Well, it's a statement based on the record.
Based on the record, sorry.
Yes.
Then
I take it that you disagree. I'm just giving you an opportunity.
Okay, I disagree.
Thank you. Now,
I disagree with the assumption in your statement.
yes, I know you do.
Yes.
Now, the statement that the historiography, basically academic work or body of academic work, is clear on the lack of communism in the progressive left. That's your fundamental statement.
Yeah, I'm willing to stand by that, yes.
Now, for that, in order to come to that statement, to make that statement, you have ignored the first-hand accounts of the Secretary General of the CPM,
And I've explained why.
and you have ignored the evidence of Yu Chui Ip, Fong Chuan Pik,
And I've explained why.
as well as other ABL and CPM members, correct?
I have taken them into account.
Yes.
Yes.
It doesn't appear in any of the footnotes in your ARI paper. As far as I can tell, it doesn't appear in other published works of yours.
Yes. They are in my thesis, though. I should note.
Well,
The
you know,
thesis is in NUS library.
I know, but when you make publications, when you put out publications, the fact that as a historian you set yourself out to make certain statements and you never explain anywhere, first, that these exist, and second, why they ought not to be taken into account, would you say is a trifle odd?
No. You
Right.
can't possibly account for every single source that ever existed anywhere in a published work of 10,000 words, including citations.
Right.
You focus on making a
No.
coherent argument and proving your arguments. You don't prove negatives, right? You don't say, I disagree with this. That will spend thousands of words doing that.
Yes.
You make an argument about what you believe based on the evidence that you have, and you cite that evidence. And then other people, of course, then come and disagree with you.
Right.
You have a discussion.
So that's your approach to history.
Yes. Yeah, and that's how I was trained.
Right. And you will, if you find a source, various sources, CPM, Secretary General, others, because you disagree with them, you set them aside and you just rely on those that you think are relevant, and you make your arguments. That's the approach you take.
And if people challenge me on that, as you have, I am willing to explain why I set them aside. And if you feel that it's absolutely necessary, I'm happy to provide a written account of why I set each and every one of these pieces aside.
Well,
and the
we know
perspectives
that
I
some of
use.
them you haven't even read. I mean, you said that earlier.
I also note you haven't shown me a single special branch document, which is
Yes.
the most coherent
Well,
and
I'm
largest
not claiming,
archive of
I'm
data.
not claiming to be a historian of repute. I'm not a historian, and nor have I written on this period. And I'm simply asking you questions on your writings.
Yes.
Thank you. Now let's look at the standards of an objective historian, since you say you are trained in this way. You are aware of the David Irving, the Holocaust denier, correct?
Yes.
Yes. You can see where this is going.
Yes.
He sued Penguin Books and others for defamation on the ground that they impugned his standing as a historian. The case is Irving versus Penguin Books Limited. In the year 2000, it was reported. Regius Professor of Modern History of Cambridge, Professor Richard Evans, gave evidence. He set out what he considered to be generally accepted standards of historical scholarship. I'm sure none of this will be news to you. So he set out the following criteria. Does Irving give a reasonably accurate account of the documents he uses? Does he translate them in a reasonably accurate and unbiased manner? Does he take into account as many other relevant documents as any professional historian could reasonably be expected to read and cite when he is using one particular source to substantiate an argument? Does he apply consistent criteria of source criticism to all of the original material he uses, examining it for its internal consistency, its consistency with other documents, its provenance, the motives of those who are responsible for it, and the audience for which it was intended? Are his arguments, his statistics, and his accounts of historical events consistent across time and based on reliable historical evidence? Does he take into account the arguments and interpretations of other historians who have examined the same documents? Does he, in other words, advance his arguments and interpretations in a reasonably objective and unbiased manner? Would you accept that those are the standards of a competent historian? Expected of a competent historian?
Sure.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Sorry, yes.
The judge says in his judgment, an objective historian is obliged to be even-handed in his approach to historical evidence. He cannot pick and choose without adequate reason. So in the face of this, can I suggest to you, the fact that your historiography, you say there is no evidence. That's what you say in the ARI paper, and you repeat that in multiple other places. You say there is no evidence of any communism in the progressive left. And in saying that, you ignore the first-hand accounts of the Secretary General of the CPM.
And I've explained why.
You ignore Yu Chu-yip.
I've explained
You
why.
ignore Fang Chuan-pik and countless other ABL and CPM members. And if you go back to what Professor Evans says, you may think them unreliable, but anyone reading your document would not even know they've said these things. Because you say there is no evidence. A proper, competent historian would, when he makes such a sweeping statement, there is no evidence, will say, the number one man in the organization does say things which are contradicted by me, but I disagree with him for this reason. I disagree with the number one man in Singapore, was controlling operations from Riau. I disagree with the number one man who was in Singapore directing operations. And I disagree with all of them for these reasons. Then people can assess whether you are being accurate or not. The Regius professor says, does he take into account as many other relevant documents as any professional historian could reasonably be expected to read and cite? You haven't even read some of the documents, and you haven't cited any of them. You would be expected to set them out, at least in a footnote, but actually more than that when you're dealing with the Secretary General, and explain yourself.
May I speak now?
Yes.
Yes. If I refer you to footnote 7 of my paper,
Yes.
right, I list out the previous historiography, and
Yes.
I conduct a very brief historiographical review.
Yes.
Now, according to conventions of the history of historical writing, that it is assumed that you will read all those other sources and you are responding to all those other sources, and you're setting yourself in the context of the broader historiography, in which, and in many of those books, the relevant documents that you've cited, including Chin Ping, Yu Choi Yip, Fang Chuan Pi, have been cited. They're part of the broader historiography of which my paper is responding to. So there really is no need to cite things which are not part of my central argument. In citing this historiography, that is assumed, right? And this paper and my other papers, as I pointed out, have been passed by juries of my peers, either my thesis through my thesis committee or this through peer review. Other historians have looked through my work. Historians who are familiar with the period have read many of those sources. Some of them are cited here who have written books, and they have found my work to be solid. And thus far, no historian has come out and openly, not openly, no historian has contradicted the central thrust of my work. Now, one would assume if my work was inaccurate or if I neglected to include any sources, there would be some sort of bad peer review, there would be accusations, there would be, my professional standing would be affected, but that has not happened, and this was published some years ago now, 2013, I think it was,
Yes.
or yes.
Dr.
So,
Thum, are you
yeah.
saying that no one has contradicted you in your statements?
My central argument, there is the subjective interpretation of facts is something which I have had vigorous debates with other historians about. But central facts that I have put forward have not been...
Are you suggesting that the argument that there's no evidence of communism in the progressive left is not central to your case?
The central argument that there's no evidence of communism.
It is the central
Yes.
argument of your position, isn't it?
Of this? No, it's not central. I think I have a much more central
No,
argument.
but it's essential
It is
to
a
your
summary
point.
of my argument.
Yeah, it is the summary of your main point.
I
that-
disagree. It's not the summary.
Okay. Now, you have to, it's a foundational block, as it were, because
Sure.
you have to, sure, okay, that's fine. Now, all of these that you cite in footnote 7, and somebody has done an analysis of them, are you saying that they have analyzed the records that I've shown you and have critiqued them and have dismissed them?
I'm saying that
Now,
historians...
please answer the question. Footnote 7, all of that you've cited, are you saying that they've analyzed the statements I put to you?
Not all the sources you've put to me. For example, the one by footprints, I think that came out the same year as my paper or after. So obviously I couldn't have included that. But definitely Chin Ping, Fang Chuan Pi, and Yu Choi Yip.
And the statements I've made from their book and the different chapters, they have been critiqued by these people?
I've critiqued them, I just critiqued them, and I'm sure they've
No,
been
you have
critiqued
just
by-
critiqued them. That's
Yes.
not the point. I'm asking you whether
They
these
have been
people...
critiqued by historians, yes.
No, please. Footnote 7. These people, you say, have they critiqued the different passages that I've put to you from?
The exact passages?
Yes.
Well, I can't recall that. There's thousands of words there. How am I supposed to recall exact passages off the top of my head?
And you are not aware, are you suggesting they have critiqued what Fang Chuanpi said, the passage I quoted to you?
Well, again, these are literally millions of words,
Yes. Except that the passages I quoted to you
Yeah.
are directly relevant to the points you make.
Yes, but I have explained why Chin Peng and Fang Chuanpi are
No,
problematic
please,
sources.
Dr. Thum, let me finish. I've asked you why you haven't referred to them and dealt with them. And your point is, well, others have dealt with them. And look at footnote 7. So now I'm asking you whether they have dealt with these points. And your answer is, how can I know?
I'm sure they've dealt with these points.
But you're not sure.
Well, I can't recall everything with 100% accuracy.
Right.
But it is part of the historiography.
All right.
Yes.
Well, I think that says a lot.
Yes, it
Dr.
does,
Thum.
doesn't it?
I'm suggesting to you, based on what you have said to us, what we have seen is not scholarship but sophistry. You can agree or disagree.
Not only do I disagree, I object to this allegation against my professional, ability.
We will come to a little bit more in the documents. Let's look at Mr. Lim Chin Siong now. You say he was never a communist. Now let me state this for the record. He was a man of tremendous courage. He was held in the highest regard by Mr. Lee.
Sorry, are you quoting me when I said he was never a communist?
I said you say. Your position is that he was never a communist.
I have published a whole article about Chin Siong,
Yes.
about what he is, and there is no doubt that communism was highly influential, but I argue he is a socialist, a
Yes.
Malayan socialist.
So he was not a communist, he was not a member of the CPM, correct?
There's no evidence that he was a member of the CPM,
Right.
beyond hearsay, of course.
Yes. Now, so Mr. Lim, I accept, man of tremendous courage. He was held in the highest regard, as you know, by Mr. Lee and many of his colleagues. He strongly believed in certain principles and fought with all his power for them. So the question is, what are those beliefs and principles? Let's look at this interview with Mr. Lim Chin Siong, which I'm sure you're aware of, the 1996 interview with Melanie Chu.
Yes.
The interview is Melanie Chu. Then after the war, you came to Singapore. You went to the Catholic High and then Chinese High, and according to Special Branch report, you became involved in ABL. Is this true? Answer, yes, it is true. Can you tell me how you joined the ABL? He says a nationalist must join ABL. What else was there? And then you are aware, of course, of Mr. Lee's battle for merger and the handwriting documentary evidence that he put out, including the notes.
Yes.
And Mr. Lee's statement that they are among several documents that Lim wrote in 1953-54 for the archives of the CPM and for the instruction of recruits to the Communist Party. And then 2003, Fong Chong Pik. I quote, Lim Chin Siong and I did have a definitely not normal association. I can never forget Lim Chin Siong's courage and determination to be the first to stand on the front line, knowingly doing what had seemed impossible. Of course, Lim Chin Siong was the left wing's most important person. After the appearance of the plan, he remained the most important left-wing person, one with even greater influence and authorities. During key moments in the struggle for independence, Lim Chin Siong and I had a relationship as fellow workers. Now, it's the most important left-wing person, a person with whom I had a special acquaintance, fellow workers, standing on the front line doing what had seemed impossible. Let's try and do this quickly. It's obvious that based on what Fang Chong-pik says, the inference is irresistible that he's saying he's a communist and a CPM member. You won't
I
agree,
don't
I
see
suppose.
that anywhere.
Okay. And then let's look at what Chin Peng says. I cannot with any degree of accuracy place a figure and so on. We have seen that. Sorry, I think I may have gotten the wrong reference. Okay, I'm sorry, I will have to come back to this. The Chang Taeyong 2013, which I think you haven't read.
Sorry, Professor Tan Tai-yong's book?
No,
Sorry.
Zhang, Z-H-A-Z-H-A-N-G, Zhang Taeyong.
Yes.
2013, we talked about it earlier, and
Oh,
I
yes,
think you
yes.
said you haven't read it.
No.
After being expelled from school for participating in an examination boycott at the end of 1951, Chen Seong continued his studies at an English stream school, but later accepted the organization's decision and devoted himself to trade union movement and constitutional struggle, becoming a shining star in the history of independence, democratic, and trade union movements in Singapore.
Yes.
Now, according to Lee Yue-sun, Chin Seong was apprehensive about the organization's decision at first, as he was afraid that he would not be able to take up the heavy responsibility. Which organization do you think he is referring to?
Is there, does he...
No, I'm just asking you, based on your knowledge, which organization do you think he's referring to?
Well, Chin Seong was an ABL member at this time, so potentially the ABL.
So you think it's the ABL's decision? ABL is what he's referring to?
Well, I can't say because the ABL, of course, has been shown to have been hugely ineffective. I'm not sure what source he's relying on as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I told you who Chang Taeyong was, but we leave your answer at that.
Okay.
Chang Taeyong.
Can I just point out the line constitutional struggle? Everything Chin Seong did was legal.
Yes, I
Yes,
know you're
we
keen
accept
to
that.
say that. Let's look at
And I'm glad we
Chang
agree on that.
Taeyong. Pardon?
Oh, I'm glad we agree on that.
No.
That it says
I said I'm keen to say. I'm keen.
yes. But
I
you
know
accept
that you
it
are
says
keen to say that.
constitutional struggle. Yes.
Well, it says a few other things too.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's look at Aloysius Chin, 1994.
Sorry, 1994.
Yes,
Oh, that's,
1994.
that precedes any of the declassified
I know,
British.
but
Okay.
you have read it?
I'm familiar. Yes.
Yes. 1994, Lim Chin Seong's involvement in the CPM has also been confirmed by CPM leaders Siu Cheong and Ah Hoi. They cited Lim as an example of a CPM member who was deployed in open front activities in political parties. Lim Chin Seong was chosen because he was considered a very important CPM member who had excellent qualities as a CUF cadre, namely dedication, trustworthiness, and moreover, he had been involved in CPM activities since his school days. You are aware of this passage?
Yes. Yes, I
Yes.
am.
You have, and correct me, I mean, I haven't looked at everything you've written. Have you referred to this? What?
I have
Aloysius
referred.
says?
I have referred to a collection of passages rather than refer to just this passage.
Right.
I have pointed out that there's no evidence that Chin Seong was ever a member of the Malayan Communist Party,
Right.
nor involved in any communist
Do you
conspiracy.
know who
to
Aloysius
sub-
Chin relies on for this?
Do refresh my memory. I don't see the citation here.
Okay, he is referring to Sui Chong and Ah Hoi, who are senior CPM cadres. Is that relevant?
Who are Sui Cheong and Ah Hoi?
Well-
Are they in the special branch ISD documents?
Have you done any research on them?
He can say their names, but they're people with many, many
No,
aliases.
I've asked you a simple question. Have you done any research on Sui Chong and Ahoy?
It's possible I have because they're aliases, right? They could be any one
Have
of a
you
number
come to the
of-
conclusion that they are not telling the truth?
I don't think that this is accurate. Yes.
No, the question I asked you is, have you done any research?
It's possible that I have, yes.
But
Because
you
they're
don't, you
aliases.
can't be sure.
I can't be sure, yeah.
You will let us know whether, after checking, whether you in fact did any research.
Well, I have done research.
No, on this point.
On this point, yes, of course I have done research on this point.
That Sui Chong and Ahoy, whether they're telling the truth. You have interrogated the passage, to use your phrase.
I have, as I've said, I have interrogated whether Chin Seong is or
That
isn't a
wasn't the
member of the
question.
Communist Party.
Aloysius refers to specific names, and he says they are
Yes.
CPM cadres.
May I see the citation?
I'm just going to give you this, and then I leave it to you. Okay.
Well, if there's no citation, I can't respond to it as a historian.
I'm asking you what you have done and what you haven't done. You've said you've read this.
Yes.
Right. He refers to CPM leaders Siu Chong and Ahoy. I'm asking you whether you're, first of all, you're aware of this passage.
Yes.
The question is whether did you follow up and check on this further?
There's no citation. It's not possible to follow up and
Okay,
check.
so
if
the
there's no
answer is
citation.
I didn't do so because there was no citation. Is that correct?
It's impossible to verify.
Thank
yes.
you. Right. So do you cite this anywhere and say, well, you know, senior CPM leaders are said to have confirmed, but it's not possible to verify?
Rather than explain why other people are wrong, I have spent my articles
No,
explaining
no,
my
no, no,
argument.
no, it's not. You don't know whether they are right or wrong. You just can't verify.
Yeah, we can't verify. Yes, okay.
If Aloysius had spoken with them, and it's based on that if,
If,
then would that be relevant?
I suppose, if, again, we're going to ifs, I'd rather
Right.
go into what we have facts
Yes.
about, evidence.
Right.
Evidence.
And it didn't strike you, okay, what is Aloysius' basis for saying this? He is referring to them as senior CPM cadres. Should I not go and try and find out a little bit more? It didn't strike you to do any of that.
I have evidence from the CPM itself, right? These two possibly were part of that, could be anyone. Aliases make it very difficult to
All right.
trace.
So you will let us know whether you actually interrogated this passage.
I will, I'll let you
Thank
know.
you.
Thank you.
Interrogated also in particular whether you did any research or work on checking up on why Aloysius refers to Siu Chong and Ahoy. Okay. If you look at what Chin Seong says about, what Chin Ping says about Chin Seong, this was a passage that I was looking for just now, page 438,
Yes.
which
We
I'm
have,
sure you're aware of.
For the record, I've been over why Chin Ping is not a reliable
I understand.
source. Yes.
So I just want to get your answer. 438, the plebiscite was Lee's bid to legitimize his policy of joining Malaysia. The
So we
opposition,
don't have this on the. Oh, thank you.
there it is. The opposition Barisan Socialist Party stood firm against the idea. Contrary to the countless allegations made over the years by Singapore leaders, academics, and Western press, we never controlled the Barisan Socialists. We certainly influenced them. But neither Dr. Lee Siu Cho, the party chief, nor, as I understand it, other prominent opposition figures like Puducherry brothers, James and Dominic, had ever been CPM members. Nor had we ever been able to control them. Unquestionably, we tried as we did with many other aspiring politicians of the time. Do you think it is significant that he doesn't mention Mr. Lim Chin Siong? I'm just asking you a question. If you think it is not significant, we can leave it and move
Mr.
on.
Lim Chin Siong was the Secretary General of the Barisan Socialists.
Right. He
correct?
mentions so
Yes.
many other people. He doesn't mention Lim Chin Siong.
And he
He
says we
mentions
never
Lee Siew
controlled
Chow. He
the...
mentions James and Dominic Puducherry.
He doesn't mention Lee Kuan Yew. He
Yes.
doesn't mention
Lee Kuan Yew
any of
wasn't
us.
in the Barisan Socialist, and he mentions Lee Kuan Yew elsewhere as to what deal he did. I'm simply asking you whether
I'm
you
sorry,
think it
this
is.
is grasping at straws. The fact that he doesn't mention
Dr.
Lim Chin
Thum, I
Siong.
don't need your characterization. Please.
You've been characterizing my
I'm asking you a
my
question.
statements.
Do you think it is significant that Chin Ping doesn't mention Lim Chin Siong, the Secretary General, when he mentions all the others? If you think it's not significant, or if you think whatever Chin Ping says is irrelevant, we'll move on.
I have never said that everything that Chin Ping says is irrelevant, but yes, I don't think it's significant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's come to the CPM and Barisan Socialists. Let's look at what he said to Harold Crouch in an interview, Chin Ping. I think at least the first part you will agree. Crouch asks, what sort of relationship did the people who became the Barisan Socialists in Singapore have with the people in southern Thailand at that time? Had there been any contact at all? And Chin Ping answers, I think among them there were some communists and there were some non-communists. You agree with that?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're asking me, do I
Yes.
agree with there were some
you
communists?
agree with
Sure,
that?
sure, there are some communists, some
Thank you.
non-communists, yeah.
Now, next question, how about the formation of the Barisan Socialists? Who initiated it?
Sorry, are you asking me or are you reading?
I'm actually reading, I'm moving on to a different document, Chen Chen, Chasing Dreams on the Wave's Crest. And this was a question.
Can I just point out, in the previous document, there was a definitive question about whether Chin Siong had contact with the party.
Sure,
Um,
you can go back to the previous document.
Tony Short asks, so...
Lim Chin Siong never had any contact with the party in southern Thailand, did he? Now, I can give you the second page. We will find the second page and give it to you, page 191. Okay. Now, let's look at the next document. This is something that was asked of Yu Chu Yip. Have you read this book, Chasing Dreams on the Wave's Crest?
Yes.
You have. The English translation, interviewer asks Yu Chu Yip, how about the formation of the Barisan Socialists? Who initiated it? Answer, it was Fong Chun Pek. At first we thought, yes, he made the decision to form the Barisan Socialists on the spot. So Barisan Socialists, according to Yu Chu Yip, was formed by CPM's lead person in Singapore. Have you known of
Yes,
this answer?
this is totally wrong.
This is totally wrong.
Absolutely wrong, yes.
Do you refer to this anywhere?
I have explained that, my argument is, putting together my sources to support my argument.
Yes.
Why? I mean, this is just totally wrong.
And
It's well established in the historiography that Fong Chong Pik had nothing to do with the formation of the Barisan, and MCP policy was against the PAP split.
Okay. But
This is covered in the, you remember, footnote 7. This is
footnote
covered
7.
there.
So
you
this
can look at
particular
those.
point is dealt with
Yes,
there.
it's dealt with, yes.
Thank you. Now, you are aware that at least 15 former Barisan leaders and activists are known to have lived in the CPM's peace villages, correct?
Yes.
And they include, just for the record, Wong Sun Fong and Chan Sun Wing. Both were PAP assemblymen elected in 1959, who then left the PAP in 61 to join the Barisan Socialists, correct?
Yes.
Now, since we are speaking about Mr. Lim, I've made clear what our position is, but I think we should remind you that both Mr. Lee and more recently in 2015, DPMTO, as well as our ambassador to Australia, in his response to an Australian publication, have said quite clearly that it was a struggle between people on both sides of the ideological divide who were prepared to die for their cause. They were men of courage and determination. And they've made various other points. I think you're aware of it.
Yes, I am aware of it.
Now, let us now turn to Operation Cold Store. I've told you how you described it. Let's look at the evidence. Chin Ping,
May I suggest the best evidence is the Special Branch Archive rather than Chin Ping, who was very, very far away from Singapore at this point in time?
well, you can suggest, but I will ask you the question,
Okay, well,
and you can
for
answer.
the record, then I'll just say that.
Right.
Leave it there.
And let's look at the evidence that Chin Ping puts forward. Page 439, February 2, 1963. Confident in the consolidation of his power base and with Malaysia barely 7 months away, Lee lowered the boom on CPM. In a pre-dawn thrust, he launched Operation Cold Store, which saw a combined force of local Malayan police conduct an island-wide roundup of alleged communist activists. Working from prepared name lists, the raiding parties managed to seize 115 suspects. The Singapore crackdown we had been expecting for almost 4 years had in fact only materialized after strong pressure on Lee from both Tunku and the British. Our deliberations with Yu Chuyip 2 years earlier had correctly forecast the event, but had failed to visualize putting in place any form of effective countermeasures. My plea to prepare for the worst had been to no avail. Operation Cold Store shattered our underground network throughout the island. Those who escaped the police went into hiding, many fled to Indonesia. I suggest to you this is one of the most direct and relevant pieces of evidence one can get, and you can agree or disagree.
No, I disagree. The Special Branch conducted the arrest. Their documents.
So what
were
Chin
used
Ping
to
says is false.
What Chin Ping says is from his perspective.
Yes, and it is false.
No, it's from his perspective.
Okay, what he says is untrue, factually.
Factually, okay.
Just this part, Operation Cold Store shattered our underground network throughout the island. That is untrue.
Oh, it's quite
As a
possible that Operation Cold Store shattered what remaining MCP network remained in Singapore. That's quite possible.
So what he says
That it could
is
be.
true.
But of course, he doesn't know, right? He's very far away.
I'm asking you what he says. Operation Cold Store shattered our underground network throughout the island. Is that true or is that not true?
Special branch interrogations of the detainees of Operation Cold Store found no evidence of any underground communist
and therefore,
network.
your view is that this is not true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, yes.
Any evidence, any reason why you think Chin Ping, as a Secretary General, would be engaging in such untruths?
Same reason anyone writes their memoirs, right? They want to put forward, as he calls it, it's my side of history. So this may be something he genuinely believes, right? And he, in writing, this is what the early 90s, at that disconnect, he may genuinely believe that that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But the documents by Special Branch on the ground justifying why Cold Store happened show no evidence, and the interrogations of the detainees that followed after detentions also found no evidence of any coherent communist conspiracy to subvert the
Have
government
you
of Singapore.
explained anywhere, including your PhD thesis, why this statement should be disregarded?
I have explained, I've made my case based on the documents, the British
No,
Special Branch.
that's not the
document.
question. The question is, have you explained why this statement by Thum Ping should be given no value or weight?
No,
You didn't see the need to.
no.
Thank you. Let us now look at the British archives. You have repeatedly referred to them.
Does this include the Special Branch documents?
I will show you the documents that I want to refer to.
Okay.
First, let's look at 22 September 1959, the note from D.S. Humphreys, tab 34. Paragraph 21. The party is illegal and is organized on a cell basis. The Singapore organization is believed to embrace over 400 persons. There are in addition several thousand sympathizers and communist-inclined members of front organizations. It is, however, impossible to estimate its real strength. For tactical reasons, the Communist Party is in favor of legal activity through the extreme left wing of the PAP led by Lim Chin Siong, who is almost certainly a secret party member. Would you say this document is relevant?
Yes, and I have interrogated this document and many documents like this to explain. May I explain?
Do you say that anywhere in any of your publications?
I'm sure I have cited many documents, because this
No.
sort of paragraph is all over the place, this kind of, so maybe
No.
not this specific document, but other documents which express the same sentiments
let's just
have
stick to
been cited
this.
and discussed.
Whether you have interrogated this particular document, this particular paragraph 21, and set out your viewpoints in any of your publications.
This particular document?
Yes.
You do realize there are thousands of documents, right?
I do realize. I'm
And
asking
so
about
I've
this
used
particular
others.
document.
So not this particular document. No, I don't. If you give me the file, could you give me the file number and I can look it up? But I am not. Off the top of my head, I don't think this particular document. But you'll have to give me the file number. It starts with CO1030 probably.
CO103/656.
1030656. Thank you. I'll check.
Paragraph 21.
No, it does not appear to be cited.
Thank you. Now, this, you know who is D.S. Humphreys?
Yes, if I remember correctly, he was was Humphreys Special Branch, or was he police? Maybe you could, sorry, it's been a long day. Maybe
I
you
just
could
want to
refresh my
ask you,
memory.
if you don't know, it doesn't matter. So we have a direct statement by Mr. Humphreys, September 1959, saying that Lim Chin Siong is almost certainly a party member, and
Yes.
what the Communist Party of Malaya is, how it is structured, and what sort of strength it has.
Yes.
You cannot recall who is Mr. Humphreys, and you have no record of dealing with this document anywhere in your publications.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I point out
Let's
I
move on.
comment on that paragraph?
Let's move on.
Oh.
This is what I needed. Now, 1962, telegram number 582 from Lord Selkirk to the Secretary of State for the Colonies. Let's look at that.
May I have the file number, please?
It's a CO1030/160.
160?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now,
Yes.
I'm quoting, I said I recognized all along that a threat was presented by the communists in Singapore. para 5. I had not, however, previously, and this is December 1962, 14 December 1962.
I think you mean 1160, not 160.
You are right, 1160. Right.
Thank you.
Para 5, I said I had recognized all along that a threat was presented by the communists in Singapore. I had not, however, previously been convinced that a large number of arrests were necessary to counter this threat. Recently, however, new evidence has been produced about the extent of the communist control of the Barisan socialists, and also there had been indications that the communists might resort to violence if the opportunity occurred. Recent statements by the Barisan socialists and Parti Rakyat supporting the revolt in Brunei confirmed this. Accordingly, Her Majesty's government was prepared to see action taken in Singapore, provided it was made clear publicly that all three governments accepted joint responsibility, and the action was taken very quickly. Now, let's look at paragraph 9. Sorry, I made a mistake here. Let me see. If you look at paragraph 2A, he then sets out the factors in favor. Subparagraph B, recent security intelligence has shown more clearly than ever before that the Barisan socialists are communist controlled, and that although they see at least no feasible alternative to constitutional tactics, they have weighed the merits of more direct action and would not hesitate to take it if it would pay. And then he sets out the arguments that they had previously, which were against direct action. And at paragraph 4, he sets them out again. And paragraph 5, we have, I think it sets out his conclusion, and he talks about the steps to be taken. Now, you know that Selkirk started out skeptical about any action to be taken against what the special branch considered to be communists. Agree? He started out skeptical.
Yes.
This telegram taken on the face of it suggests that now he was convinced that they needed to be arrested. Correct?
On the face of it, it does suggest that. I do interrogate this document if you would give me the chance to explain it.
Well, I think what we need to do is to move on. And
Whoa, come on. You've asked me to interrogate so many documents. This is a document I have actually interrogated, and I explain, in great detail in my
Yes,
work the
but
issues with this document, and now we're not going
Dr.
to address it
Thum,
at all.
we will address it, but in a while. Let me just run through
Is that a
few
promise?
documents.
We will come back to this
We
document?
can come back to it, and
No,
if you want
we
to come
will.
back it, we will come back to
We
this
will.
document.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold you to that.
We
Thank
will
you.
come back. Now, let's look at, which I'm sure you have interrogated as well. If you can look at your ARI working paper, page 19, see the third and fourth paragraphs. You suggests that the main reason for the arrest cited by Selkirk was to give to the Federation the arrest they so badly wanted, correct?
Yes.
And in that context, you refer to two documents.
Yes.
They are in footnotes 124 and 125. And you say at page 18, if you look at page 18, you look at the sentence to which you give footnote 124.
135, sorry, not 125.
124 and 125. Look at page 18.
Oh, sorry.
Faced with this scenario, Barisan members were deeply frustrated. I'm talking about the text. The very last paragraph at page 18.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were referring to the. You said the arrest they so badly craved, right? Earlier, that's on page 19.
I moved on from there,
Oh, okay.
and I'm referring to two other documents.
So now you're going back to page,
page 18.
18.
I'm reading to you your last paragraph. Faced with this scenario, Barisan members were deeply frustrated. They had adhered to constitutional methods, believing that, as in Kenya and Nyasaland, the British would not hesitate to use violent suppression in Singapore as long as the law remained on the books. But even if the ISC was abolished, the referendum demonstrated that constitutional processes could be manipulated. And then you say that hostile progressive forces could hostile forces which are hostile to progressive forces could counter that. And then Lim Chin Siong saying that they must carry on with the constitutional struggle.
He urged them to
Yes.
continue peaceful
And,
long-term constitutional struggle, and the party agreed that the only option was to keep
Yes.
using peaceful constitutional processes with the aim of winning elections to the federal parliament and building a multiracial progressive coalition.
Yes. Now, that's what you say. Look at the fourth paragraph in page 19 again.
19.
The second sentence, Barisan members had complained that the constitution was pointless if it was so easily manipulated, asking if there was another way forward. What is the another way forward that you're referring to?
The meetings were held to discuss strategy in the wake of the
I'm simply
referendum.
asking you, what is the another way forward that you're referring to?
What they were asking for. They were asking if there was another way.
So they were not having in mind any specific way.
They were considering many options, yeah.
Can you tell us the options they were considering?
Um,
The other ways?
Well,
You refer to one another way. What was it?
yeah, I referred to one another way, sorry.
You say, asking if there was another way forward.
Yes, that's the question. Is there another way? If the PAP can so easily rig a referendum, and if the constitutional
I understand all
struggle
that
is
preamble. What is
Yes.
the other way?
there is no specific other way.
What were the
It's a
other ways they were
discussion.
considering?
They were, a whole range of options.
Okay, tell us.
Including, I think what you're asking me is
And
did
what you want to avoid answering? Yes.
non-constitutional struggle, which they then decided was off the table. They would
Thank you.
continue to adhere to peaceful constitutional struggle.
Right. You imply here that Selkirk willfully chose to interpret the evidence as calls to abandon constitutional action. And basically, you're saying Selkirk had no grounds whatsoever for coming to his conclusion, correct?
For his which conclusion?
For his conclusion that there were calls to abandon constitutional action.
I think if you look at the document, he
No,
says
I'm just asking you what
No,
he-
that's not his conclusion. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. His conclusion is that the Barisan is communist controlled.
Right. Now let's look at what you say here. In 6 lines, Selkirk added that the reason intelligence demonstrated communist control of the Barisan and that Lim had never explicitly ruled out violent action. Your suggestion there is that Selkirk had no basis to come to that conclusion?
That the Barisan was communist controlled?
No.
And that's what I said. His recent intelligence demonstrated communist control of the Barisan. Yes, I argue that he has no way to make that link.
And secondly, he had no basis to conclude that they might go into violent action.
Lim never explicitly ruled out violent action. That's what I wrote there. I'm
asking you what you're saying about Selkirk. So
Yes.
your point is, Selkirk says Lim never explicitly ruled out violent action, and reason intelligence demonstrated communist control of the Barisan. So you accept that Lim never explicitly ruled out violent action, but you say Selkirk was wrong, that reason intelligence demonstrated communist control of the Barisan. Would that be an accurate way of reading that, coupled with what you
This
said?
is very confusing. So Selkirk makes 2 big points.
Yes,
1, recent intelligence shows that the Barisan is communist controlled.
right.
2, Lim never explicitly
I know.
rules out
What do you
violent
say
action.
about, what are
And
you
both
saying
are, so what I'm saying is that the evidence for these 2 points are accounts of 2 post-referendum Barisan meetings.
I understand.
Yes.
And
And,
do you think that Selkirk was correct in his interpretations?
well, he's incorrect in that the intelligence demonstrated communist control of the Barisan.
Right.
But it is true that Lim doesn't explicitly rule out violent action. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And your assertion is that there was unanimous agreement among the Barisan members to keep following the constitutional agreement?
Well, that's because these are accounts of meetings. That's what was reflected in the account.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's look at the documents. Remind me later, there is one document I need to look at later, 14 December. No. 14 December. I missed it, remind me. Yeah, later. You have referred to these notes. This is meeting at Barisan Socialist Headquarters, 23rd of September 1962. Let's look at paragraph 1 first. The meeting was arranged by members of the organizing subcommittee to interpret and discuss new lines of policy and tactics laid down by the Secretary General, Lim Chin Siong, in his speech at the Barisan Socialist. Okay, so that's the purpose of the meeting. Para 2. At the meeting, which lasted for most of the day, source reports that Chok Ka Tong, the party CEC, presided. He had recently taken over the effective control of the organizing subcommittee of the party from Fong Si Suan, who now spends more time in the direction of activities in the trade union field. Fong Si Suan, however, still retains the post of the secretary of this subcommittee and is still responsible for the overall control. Okay, so that's paragraph 2. And then over the page, paragraph 3, the theme chosen for the discussion was the first of 3 main principles laid down by Lim Chin Siong. Quote, so long as the conditions for peaceful constitutional methods of struggle remain available to us, we will persist in the peaceful constitutional method of struggle. Lim Chin Siong had said it in a speech, and they were considering it at this meeting. Para 4, Chok opened the discussion by reviewing the history of the struggle in Malaya and elsewhere and said that along the road of fighting for national liberation, the people of our country in different circumstances have produced different forms of struggle. He cited the armed struggle against the Japanese during the war and against the ruling classes afterwards. There he is referring to the period of the emergency, correct?
Yes.
The armed struggle afterwards.
Yep.
Thank you. More recently, the constitutional struggle was being waged against a reactionary clique in the Federation capital who were utilizing all sorts of ordinances to suppress the people's demands. Now we go to para 6. Thum Ping Tjin then spoke. One of his main points was that while some people say that in communist countries there is a so-called dictatorship of the proletariat, or people's democratic dictatorship, the parliamentary system of the bourgeoisie in the colonial capitalist countries was in fact a system of dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. And then he talks about Singapore. And then para 7, this is Thum Ping Tjin. He says, it would be wrong to think that because after a century of struggle, the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie still prevailed, the democratic people's opposition was of no avail. He asserted that oppression is beneficial and not harmful to us, because in the long run it increased our mass following. Outwardly, it might appear that they had been suppressed, but each time they suffered a setback, the tide of their struggle would flow again in ever greater strength. Constitutional opposition enabled them to expose the ruling class and its system, train our masses and our cadres, and educate and organize and unite the people. The political consciousness of the masses and the organization would thereby strengthen so that when the stage of struggle arrives, these masses will serve our purpose. Doesn't this suggest that the constitutional struggle was a means to an end? You use the constitutional means to expose their limitations, raise political consciousness in order for the eventual stage of struggle. Agree?
So sorry, what was that question again? You're saying the constitutional struggle is a means to an end?
Yes.
Yeah, the struggle is anti-colonial. It's a means to get rid of the British.
I didn't say colonial or anti-colonial.
Right.
So please listen to the question.
Yes.
They will use constitutional means as a means to an end. They will expose the limitations of the reactionaries. They will raise political consciousness through this constitutional struggle, and until they reach the next stage of the struggle. Agree? That's what you are saying.
Yeah. I'm not sure what your point is, but that seems to be what it's saying, yes.
Thank you. Paragraph 8. Other speakers discussed the theme of constitutional struggle on similar lines. One suggested that class contradictions in a colonial country would reach an explosive stage one day. Another claimed that in the present international situation in which two social systems were fighting for final victory, the socialist systems is on our side. There were 7 socialist countries in Europe today, while in Asia, China was a major power as well as a socialist country which could deal a blow at or act as a curb upon the USA. Progressive forces amongst the people in the Western countries were rising to oppose their governments, and the Afro-Asian countries provided a formidable opposition to colonialism. Their victory would help our cause. Now that's the background, but the model that they seem to be looking at are China and 7 socialist countries in Europe, correct?
And Afro-Asian countries.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you
Former
tell us
colonies
which are the
or-
7 socialist countries in Europe they were looking at?
No.
Thank you. Paragraph 9. The speaker warned that constitutional methods of struggle would not necessarily ensure victory in the long run, as was shown by the experience of other countries which had won their independence from the Western powers by these means. And then he refers to India. In different circumstances, other countries such as the USSR, China, North Korea, North Vietnam, and Cuba had adopted the method of armed struggle or armed revolution. The USSR could not have used the peaceful constitutional method of struggle at the time of revolution because she was surrounded by capitalist countries. Present international situation, however, was different because there now existed a bulwark of countries safeguarding world peace which provided conditions for a peaceful constitutional struggle. So it's contrasting with the USSR and saying there is a system in place and there are some conditions for peaceful constitutional struggle. Then paragraph 11, Neo's conclusion was that it would not be possible to make a final decision as to whether the revolution must be brought about by armed or constitutional struggle, since different methods were appropriate to different environments, but in Singapore today, the constitutional method should be maintained. Good leftist organization of the masses might, however, provide a different situation after another 5 years. So essentially, for now, we'll take the constitutional method, but let's prepare for an armed struggle if necessary in another 5 years, correct?
Oh, if necessary, sure.
Thank you.
Armed struggle against occupying and colonial power is, legitimate.
And the
has been
established
shown
system of governance.
against a colonial power. That's
Right.
the established system, a
Right.
colonial occupying power.
And if
Britain.
Malaysia came about, will there be a colonial power?
If Malaysia came about, would there be a
Yes.
colonial power?
Yes.
It depends on the structure of Malaysia, right?
The
Is
Malaysia
Singapore
that was
occupied
proposed.
by the Malaysia that was proposed? Well, I think there were colonial aspects to it. Singapore was underrepresented, and that's what the Barisan argued. They were underrepresented.
So we will
they were
take that
under-
as your
yeah,
views.
Okay.
Now, so you say that if Singapore was independent, then this reference to possible armed struggle doesn't apply, correct?
Yes, of course. It's anti-colonial.
Right. Now, paragraph 12, Chong Ka Tong summed up the views of the various comrades under the following heading. The deceitful and hypocritical system in which they were waging their constitutional struggle should be recognized so that they were under no illusions. They must themselves determine the form their struggle should take. Basically, armed struggle is the highest form of struggle, but whether it should adopt it or not would depend on the entire international situation. Experience elsewhere had shown that when the masses had reached the point where they were capable of suppressing reactionaries, it was questionable whether the peaceful constitutional struggle should still be adhered to. So in summary, we say carry on with the constitutional struggle, but when the masses were capable of overthrowing the reactionaries, then can go on to the armed struggle, correct?
If armed struggle is necessary, yeah.
Paragraph
Against a
13.
Colonial power.
Now, did they say it's against a colonial power there?
Well, the struggle is an anti-colonial struggle.
No,
That's what
I mean,
the struggle
is there anything here which says it's anti-colonial?
Much earlier on in the document, they talked about anti-colonialism and freedom, so it's safe to assume they're talking about anti-colonialism.
Isn't it safe to assume that they're talking about taking over power in the way communists will understand?
Well, they're not communists. There's no connection
that's
here.
your
There's
point.
no
I'm
mention
putting-
of communism here, right?
I'm-
Which is my point about Selkirk. Selkirk says it shows that communist control. There, the word communist doesn't even appear. I
Dr.
think.
Thum, communism and communist appears all over this building, all over this document.
Mhm.
If you look at USSR, China, North Korea, North Vietnam, Cuba, those were the models they were looking at.
And
At
they're
one
also
stage.
looking at socialist countries in Europe and Afro-Asia.
So I
and all
asked
of
you which
Afro-Asia.
socialist countries,
Mhm.
and you say you don't know,
I don't know.
right? Isn't it clear that they were referring to those which were part of the Soviet bloc?
Possibly.
Are
And they
there
were
any
also
others?
referring to Afro-Asia.
Were there any other socialist countries in Europe other than those in 1961, other than those in the Soviet bloc?
Depends how you define socialism, but based on my understanding of your question, no.
And therefore, clearly, all the examples that you see they refer to are what we would understand as communist countries, right?
Afro-Asia?
leave out Afro-Asia for the time
but
being.
there's the Afro-Asia is in there as well.
Europe,
We can't
Europe
just
and
selectively leave
China,
out
Europe and Asia, they are all communist countries.
Europe and Asia.
China, North
China,
Korea, North Vietnam.
Korea, North Vietnam. Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Now, doesn't that make it quite clear that they are talking about, regardless of whether there is a colonial power or not, in 5 years after we have worked with the masses, we use them and we use armed struggle if necessary to take over power. Yes?
No, it's about winning independence, the anti-colonial struggle.
Right. Now, let's define it, keep it to anti-colonial struggle for the time being. Let's look at paragraph 13. Experience elsewhere showed that there was no country in the world which had attained a thorough success in revolution through constitutional processes, and that throughout Southeast Asia, including Malaya, the ruling classes would not lightly hand over political power to the leftists. What do you think that means?
Well, exactly what it says. The ruling classes would not likely hand over political power to the leftists.
Yes.
Yes.
So even if the country is independent, they do not believe that the ruling classes will hand over power to the leftists, correct?
The ruling classes refer to the colonial classes in this case. This is 1962.
And this is 1962.
And it goes on to say, nevertheless, everyone disliked bloodshed and the use of arms.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. And the question of whether it be necessary
Since we're arguing
to
this,
resort to them would not depend on the people, but on the reactionary government of the bourgeoisie, which is their position that if the colonial government used force of arms against them, they must pick up force of arms they must pick up arms to resist the colonial government and win independence.
let me remind you of a few things. Go back to paragraph 6. One of his main points was that while some people say that in communist countries there is a so-called dictatorship of the proletariat or people's democratic dictatorship, so he is referring to the communist model there, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Go
Yeah.
back to paragraph 5.
Well, there's a lot more in that paragraph. May I just point out?
There is a lot more,
Yes.
but let's go back to paragraph 5. Chong Ka-Tung proceeded to cite the constitutional and armed struggle of the leftists against the reactionaries in other parts of Southeast Asia. In every quarter, the strength of the people finally prevailed over that of the reactionary forces. However, this experience, for instance, of the CPI, Communist Party of India in Kerala, showed that the reactionary cliques would not lightly hand over political power to the genuine leftist political party. India at that time was independent, about 1947, it's about 15 years, correct?
Yes.
They are saying that the reactionary forces in India will not hand over power to the leftist forces, even if constitutional means were used, correct?
He's saying that the example of the Communist Party of India in Kerala showed that the reactionary cliques would not likely hand over political power to
And we are
genuine
not
leftist
talking about an
political
anti-colonial struggle there, correct?
power. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. So does that inform you that what they are saying is that even if the colonials leave, they will leave behind structures and reactionaries who will not lightly hand over power to the leftist forces, correct?
You're referring to neo-colonialism?
I'm referring to a country that becomes independent,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm referring to, for example, by reference to what they are saying, the analogy of India. And in fact, he expressly says from the analogy, he drew the lesson for their own genuine leftist political party in Singapore. That's in paragraph 5. their point is, even if Singapore were to become independent, and there is no more anti-colonial struggle, the structures that will be left behind will be reactionary, and these reactionary structures will never hand over power willingly to the left. And that is the lesson for Singapore. Agree?
It is entirely possible.
Thank you.
The point I made with this document was A, that there is no evidence of communist control, and B, that they do agree at the end to continue following peaceful constitutional
We'll
struggle.
come to all of that. But the
Yes.
point is, now by reference,
Your argument was not used by Special Branch to justify coal store, if that's what you're wondering.
I'm just referring to what you have said.
No, you're referring to what he has said.
No, I'm referring to what you have said, and I'm taking you through the document which you have relied upon
Yes, yes,
and putting it to you.
yes.
Now, therefore, the references, for example, in paragraph 11, in the context of everything else that has been said, is not restricted to an anti-colonial struggle. But even if Singapore became independent, good leftist organization or the masses might, however, provide for a different situation, including an armed struggle, because these people who take over from the colonials, even in an independent situation, will probably not give us power. That's clear, based on what I've taken you through. Agree?
I have not addressed that in my work, but sure, it's
thank you.
hypothetically.
Well, I'm not talking
Possible.
about hypothetical. I'm talking about what they are saying.
You're trying to read very much into what they're saying. I don't
No,
know
you
whether
read
your
an anti-colonial
interpretation is
struggle
correct.
into what they are saying, and I'm
Yes.
pointing out to you, reading it on the face of it, the reference to Kerala is very important.
Mhm.
The reference to colonial masters leaving behind structures which, and reactionaries in power
Yes.
who will prevent
Mhm.
leftists from taking over. That means in a situation where the country becomes independent, you
Right,
will still
and
not get
not democratic. Because
Well-
if you look at paragraph 5, he does point out that, constitutional processes. If we can go back to paragraph 5, for example,
Yes.
they do make reference to manipulation of constitutional processes
Yes.
by the PAP.
Right. So for
Yes.
those reasons, even if it's fairly obvious, even if there was a independence, they go on with the constitutional processes for a few years and then be prepared to move into armed struggle if necessary. I mean, that's obvious.
I wouldn't say that's obvious. It is a possibility.
Right.
But my argument, as I've said before, is that this document does not demonstrate communist control of the Barisan, and it shows
We
that they
will
agreed
come
to
to
peaceful
that,
constitutional
so we
struggle.
don't need to deal with the issues that I haven't yet asked. Now, would you say, since they talk in positive terms as a possible model, USSR, China, North Korea, North Vietnam, and Cuba, and obviously the 7 socialist countries in the Soviet bloc,
And Afro-Asia.
would you say they are the models of democracy that you were talking about just now?
They are independent countries.
Yeah, I didn't ask that, because you said well, the PAP was using all sorts of means, but would you not see that they were referring to countries which were communist dictatorships as a
Yes.
possible model?
Yes, yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Now, paragraph 15. Sorry, paragraph 13, I'm sorry, I missed it. Experience, nice. Yeah. Experience elsewhere showed that there was no country in the world which had attained a thorough success in revolution through constitutional processes, and that throughout Southeast Asia, including Malaya, the ruling classes would not likely hand over political power to the leftists. Nevertheless, everyone disliked bloodshed, and the use of arms and question of whether it would be necessary to resort to them would depend not on the people, but on the reactionary government of the bourgeoisie. Today, Lee Kuan Yew still had no army under his command. If one day he would replace the constitutional form of struggle with a military dictatorship so that there would be no need for him to resort to deceit and intimidation anymore, the people themselves, however, detested armed struggle and would only resort to it if compelled to do so. And then, para 14, another speaker said, in the present circumstances in Malaya, they were expanding the struggle through peaceful and constitutional means to obtain political power, but anyhow, armed struggle must be used to bring about a complete revolution. So again, what they are saying is, this speaker was saying, you look at the experience throughout Southeast Asia, including Malaya, the ruling classes would not likely hand over political power to the leftists. Statement number one. Statement number two, therefore, armed struggle must be used to bring about a complete revolution. That was the view of one speaker, reading 13 and 14 together. Would you agree?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Okay. The point being made in paragraphs 13 and 14 is that the ruling classes will not lightly give up power, hand over political power to the leftists, even if the country becomes independent, because they are referring to all of Southeast Asia. And in the present circumstances in Malaya, they were extending the struggle through peaceful and constitutional means to obtain political power, but armed struggle must be used to bring about a complete revolution. So regardless of, even if a country becomes independent, that particular speaker thought that armed struggle was necessary to bring about complete revolution. Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, paragraph 15. Finally, another speaker defined the task of our revolution as consisting of two stages. First, to eliminate colonialism entirely, and the second, to overthrow the semi-feudal society and establish a socialist system. To achieve this aim, the two methods of armed and constitutional struggle were available, and no matter which was chosen, it could not be used alone. Armed struggle would always have to be coordinated with a constitutional method. The bourgeoisie and the petty bourgeoisie would need to be united with the worker and peasant classes. In other words, all those who had suffered from foreign political and economic oppression. Now, what was clear from this speaker is that first stage, there are two stages to this revolution. First stage is the constitutional means. And I rephrase it. The first stage was to eliminate colonialism entirely. And the second stage was to overthrow the semi-feudal society and establish a socialist system. And an armed struggle has to be used to bring that about. Right?
Yes.
Thank you. In fact, therefore, the consensus here was that an armed struggle was likely to be necessary based on your own answers. Agree?
But for now, they would adhere to peaceful and constitutional methods. We accept
For the
that.
first
Yes.
stage, and then
Yeah.
they will take to the armed struggle to complete the revolution. That's what you just agreed to.
It seems likely that an armed struggle is possible.
Yes.
I wouldn't say that this is any sort of definitive planning meeting for them to assume armed struggle, but given the history of anti-colonialism at that point in time, especially Vietnam, Indonesia, the overthrow of colonialism had necessitated
Dr.
armed
Thum,
struggle.
that wasn't the question I asked. The question I asked was there was consensus
Yeah.
that there will be resort to armed struggle to complete the revolution.
If necessary, yes.
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 And if you look at page 19 of the ARI paper, you say, last paragraph, Selkirk chose to interpret these as calls to abandon constitutional action and disregarded the unanimous agreement to keep following peaceful constitutional action.
Yes.
Was there unanimous agreement to keep following peaceful constitutional action?
There was in...
in this document.
This document? Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel that they've all agreed. The first stage, peaceful
What if they
constitution.
agreed? We just agreed,
constitutional
the two of us.
Yes.
It's one of the few points of agreement today that they said they will start with a constitutional struggle
Yes.
and then they will complete the revolution through armed struggle.
Well, one guy said that. Others
Well,
talked about
two
different
guys.
examples. Yes.
Yes.
Two guys out of a big meeting.
And
yes.
others talked about not ruling out armed struggle as
Not
well.
ruling out armed struggle. Yes. Not ruling out armed struggle.
No
Yes.
reasonable interpretation of this document can suggest that they all agreed unanimously that we are just going to use peaceful constitutional means. Agree?
No, I think it feels it. Clearly, the sense from it is that peaceful. Everyone, that you cited, peaceful
So let me
constitutional means for
understand-
now. But we don't rule out.
Let me understand the way you read documents.
My point is,
Now let me finish.
the way I use
Dr.
the
Thum,
documents.
let me finish.
Okay, but
So-
you're dealing with things that don't have to do with my argument.
Ugh.
I just want to
Let
point
me
that out.
finish. It has got everything to do with your argument.
I disagree.
The way, if a document says we will first, for the time being, use constitutional means, we will get into power, and then we will achieve the fully socialist system through an armed struggle.
No, not when we get into power, right? They said that if armed struggle is necessary for us to achieve socialism, then we would pick up
Or
arms.
rather, the first stage is
It's
to
not- once
eliminate
they get into
colonialism,
power, yeah,
eliminate colonialism,
eliminate
and
colonialism.
second, overthrow the semi-feudal society and establish a socialist system. And to do that,
Yes, those were the
we
same.
will use both methods.
Yes, those objectives to overthrow colonialism and achieve socialism were also the stated objectives of the People's
The
Action Party.
document says that,
Yes.
and you say the document says they all unanimously agreed on a peaceful constitutional struggle.
What I wrote was that there was a unanimous agreement to keep following peaceful constitutional action, which is
Why
my
didn't you
assessment.
mention that they also said that they will resort to armed struggle if necessary?
Because they haven't resorted to armed struggle. I can say many things, but if I don't break the law, right? If I now, think, well, maybe in a year's time, if necessary, I will steal a loaf of bread to keep
Right.
myself fed.
So
You don't arrest me for that.
if they
right?
say
My
they are
point is
going
that
to-
Selkirk says that they are communist controlled, and there's nowhere in this document that says they are communist controlled, right? I never
We'll come
argued
to
that they
Selkirk
are
in a
not
minute.
communist. I never argued
we will
that
come to,
communism doesn't exist.
We will come
Selkirk
to
says they are
Selkirk.
communist
can you please
controlled.
stop?
Dr. Thum, could you please?
Sorry, I'm
let
just
Ms.
trying to
ask
make a
question?
point.
Yeah, just
No,
answer the questions
you are
first.
trying to,
Yeah.
with respect, you're trying to just confuse the point.
No, this is my argument.
me
Black
finish.
and white.
No, black and white, I'm referring you to it. Selkirk chose to interpret these as calls to abandon constitutional action, disregarded the unanimous agreement to keep following peaceful constitutional action. You make it sound that, they all came together, they all agreed on a peaceful constitutional action, and yet Selkirk chose to interpret it as calls to abandon constitutional action. If you read the document, it's completely different. What they were talking
disagree.
about, let me finish.
Okay.
What they were talking about is we need to overthrow the colonialists, but whoever takes over is not going to hand over power to us. Let's all be clear. And we will need to engage in armed struggle. And so we keep both options open. And in
Yes.
fact, both will have to be used.
Both options open, yes.
And both will have to be used.
Some people do say that, yes.
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 How can you conclude from that that there was unanimous agreement that peaceful methods only will be used?
Because they said that in the immediate future, we will keep following constitutional action. It's right there in black and white. In the future, if they break the law, then you arrest them for it.
I
right?
see how you use documents.
May I
and
refer
how you
to
interpret
the minutes of the committee of selection that picked this committee, right? It only says the following people were selected for the committee. It doesn't then include a lot of other discussion around who was picked. Do we then assume that it was unanimous based on the minutes? I mean, minutes are one version, and this is a report by a mole.
I think,
you know, so my
I
point.
don't know what you're now saying. I think you're thrashing around a little bit.
No.
This document may not be reliable. It's only the minutes.
No. That's not what I'm saying. That's
That
not
is
what I'm
exactly
saying.
what you just said.
No, I disagree.
Now, let's just look at what you say and what Selkirk was saying. Look at the 11th of December 1962 telegram from him, paragraph 2b. This is step 37. Paragraph 2b. Recent security intelligence has shown more clearly than ever before that Barisan socialists are communist controlled, and that although they see at least no feasible alternative to constitutional tactics, they have weighed the merits of more direct action and would not hesitate to take it if it would pay. Let's deal with the second point. He is absolutely correct in that part of the statement, correct?
Yeah, but the crucial point is that the Barisan are communist controlled. That's what he said.
No.
That was the basis for coal store, that they were communist controlled. The coal store was not justified on the basis of what they may or may
We haven't come
not
to
do.
coal store. We are dealing with this document
You
and
said,
your characterization.
if we can call up the transcript, you said, let us come to coal store.
I know,
So
but
are
we
dealing
haven't
with
yet
coal
come
store.
to the actual arrests. Now let's deal with these two documents. They are the precursors. Let's go back to paragraph 19. You are talking about Selkirk. You say the evidence which Selkirk cited was accounts of two post-referendum Barisan meetings.
Yes.
Barisan members had complained that the constitution was pointless if it was so easily manipulated, and asking if there was another way forward. Most people will interpret that as armed struggle.
That is an option, yes.
You say that Barisan members had raised the question. You then say Selkirk chose to interpret these as calls to abandon constitutional action and disregarded the unanimous agreement to keep following peaceful constitutional action.
Yeah.
Now, that is simply untrue characterization of the document, because there was no unanimous agreement just to keep following peaceful constitutional action. There was unanimous agreement that for the time being, they will follow the constitutional actions, but armed struggle was also necessary, and they will continuously keep it open. And as you agreed just now, they see no feasible alternative to constitutional tactics. They weighed the merits of more direct action and would not hesitate to take it if it would pay. You agreed that's an accurate interpretation of the document.
Yes.
Here you are talking about that aspect. You are not talking about communism. You are only talking about his interpretation on what actions they will take. You are telling the reader Selkirk's interpretation on what action they will take is wrong. Where reading it again now, with the benefit of all the points I have made, would you agree that this statement should have been reworded to say, Selkirk, you should say they were asking if there was another way forward. So they unanimously agreed that they will stick to constitutional means now, but also keep the armed option open, and agreed that it was necessary to keep it side by side with a constitutional action. And then you should say Selkirk chose to interpret these calls as them saying there was no feasible alternative to constitutional tactics now, but they weighed the merits of more direct action and would not hesitate to take it if it would pay. That's how you should have characterized Selkirk's assessment. Agree?
Are we going to look at the other document as well?
We will first on this document.
Okay, then let's look at the other document because it's based
First
on
on
both.
this
Then we
document-
will have a discussion about what Selkirk,
On
whether
this
Selkirk's assessment.
document, do you agree?
But I cite two documents. Let's look
Yes.
at the second one as well.
Dr. Thum, could you answer the question on this document first
This
before we move on to the other one?
Just based on this document, that should be worded
Just based on
differently.
this document, I accept that I could have worded what I said better. Yes.
Thank you. Now, let's look at the other document now. Because these are all central to your arguments. 30th September 1962. Look at paragraph 2. At the meeting, which lasted for most of the day, source reports that Chok, who had recently taken control or the effective control of the organizing subcommittee. Sorry, I'm reading the document. My apologies. Sorry. Source reports, this is 30th September 1962. Source reports that the meeting of Barisan Socialist officials to interpret and discuss new lines of policy and tactics laid down by the Secretary General was continued at the Barisan Socialist headquarters on 30th September. Para 2, the meeting was instructed to consider the subject under the following 3 headings. No matter how the situation changes, the next objective of the struggle is to overthrow the PAP government. B, in the event of the realization of the phony merger, the party should secure election of members to the Dewan Rakyat. C, the necessity for uniting the left-wing forces on a pan-Malayan basis to overthrow the right-wing federation government. Okay, para 7. One speaker repeated the warning given at the meeting of 23rd September 19, that they should not entertain any illusions about the existing system of parliamentary democracy. Again cited the Indian government's intervention. They should reassure themselves, however, when their fortunes were low, with the knowledge that in many countries the leftist forces had encountered similar setbacks and that the reactionaries would fall in the end. Para 8, he talks about Lee Kuan Yew not willing to clash with them. They shouldn't take the another form of struggle first. They must consolidate, and they must not abandon the constitutional struggle and maintain it under the party's collective leadership. Now,
Mr. Shanmugam, based on what you've read here has reminded me why the Communist Party in Kerala was referred to. So the reason why in the previous document they were referred to was because they legitimately and fairly won an election, and then the Congress, Federal National Government of India then wouldn't let them take power.
I understand that.
Yes, okay.
But the point I referred to India was to point out to you that you're completely wrong in suggesting that the struggle was somehow just related to anti-colonialism, because India had been independent by that time for 15 years.
Well, yes, but they cancelled the result of a legitimate election, which
Would
was
you let
fairly
me
won
finish,
by the
please?
Communist Party.
I haven't finished. That Therefore, that makes the point I've been making to you for some considerable time now. Even after independence, the reactionary forces will not lightly hand over power. Look at India, same with us, and therefore armed struggle is necessary. We
Maybe
must,
necessary.
yes, if necessary,
If
and we should
necessary.
continue to keep it open.
I have never denied that in my work.
Well, we will see.
Okay.
The way you have characterized it.
Okay.
Now, the paragraph 8 makes it clear that the adherence to constitutional struggle was conditional as long as it were available to them, correct? It was conditional in that sense.
Yes, yes, of course, yes.
Right.
If it's taken
No.
away, they can't follow it.
Now, let's look at some communist theory.
Mr. Shamu, may I interject and point out this discussion we're having is already established. There have been historians arguing these exact points. And so I have already debated these, and I can summarize this argument if you want. And it's a difference of subjective interpretation.
I would like to just go through, and I ask you to bear with me. Okay? Lenin's theory, dictatorship is rule based directly upon force and unrestricted by any laws. The revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat is a rule won and maintained by the use of violence by the proletariat against the bourgeoisie, rule that is unrestricted by any laws. You accept that's fairly standard communist theories put out by Lenin, correct?
Lenin, yeah, sure, yes.
Yeah. Now, you look at the last paragraph of this document, paragraph 14. Just read that paragraph to yourself, the last paragraph, para 13. Sorry, 14. Tell me when you're done. I think you would have done by now.
Yes.
Yes. Chok Tong says he was referring to a transitional phase where the bourgeoisie will be allowed to exist, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Final phase, they won't be allowed to exist, correct? Because this is a transitional phase.
Yes. Yeah. That's good.
So that fits in with the theory on the dictatorship of the proletariat, where the bourgeoisie will cease to exist, correct?
It aligns with it, yes.
In a sense, that's perfect when communism reaches its perfect position, correct? And there will be
I'm
no
not an
elections.
expert on communism. If you're saying that, I have no
I think
reason.
as a historian, you know enough to know that communism, the final stage, it's perfection and there are no elections, correct?
Perfection. Sorry.
Well, okay, let me leave out the word perfect. The ultimate society that communism aims for is dictatorship of the proletariat without any elections, correct?
I can't comment.
You can't
on that.
answer.
Look, I'm
On
not
a fairly
an expert
basic point on communism. Okay,
Yeah.
now let me show you a statement by Yong Kuo, who's the Deputy Secretary General of the CPM. This appears in Aloysius Chin, Communist Party of Malaya, page 72. I think I will have to read it out to you, okay? In the months before the Baling peace talks held in December 1955, Yong Kuo, the Deputy Secretary General of the CPM, wrote several appreciations on the correct tactics to be adopted by the party in the changed political circumstances in the then Federation of Malaya. One of them clearly showed that it was the intention of the CPM to trick the Alliance Party into the temporary pact. He wrote, meaning Yongkuo, undoubtedly our tactics today are to join with the Tunku in a common effort to get rid of the colonial rule of the British imperialist. After there is a state of peace, we can then immediately win over more support of the broad masses of the people and to take a step further by overthrowing the Tunku's bourgeoisie dictatorship and changing it into a joint dictatorship of all races and state. In this, Yongkuo was following the technique adopted by Lenin, who stated, communists must be able to agree to sacrifices, even if need be to resort to all sorts of stratagems, maneuvers, illegal methods, evasions, and subterfuges in order to achieve their end. If the party had been accorded legal status, it would not have given up the illegal and subversive methods. The essence of communist strategy is deception and preparedness to resort to violence when necessary, and such a strategy demands the adoption of secret and illegal methods, even when the party has legal status. Yongkuo may be quoted again, we are no believers in legality and are certainly not content with open and legal struggle. Our aim is to cover up and support an illegal struggle by means of an open legal activities. Open and legal activities are used to create the conditions in preparation for a struggle to overthrow the enemy with illegal revolutionary methods. Are you aware of this document? Yongkuo's document?
Yongkuo,
you are.
yes.
That's classic communist theory, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I think just now you were saying you are not aware. Now,
Of Yongkuo? No, I'm
no,
aware of
about
Yongkuo.
classic communist theory. You have agreed with me about the transitional phase leading to the final phase that is referred to, which pretty much is the summing up of the second document. Can I suggest to you now, going back again to your ARI document, the point stands, now that you've seen all of this, there's nothing in the second document that in any way suggests there was unanimous agreement to give up armed struggle.
Well, can we go back to the second document?
We've just gone through the second document.
No, we went through 2 paragraphs of it.
Okay, please go through. Tell me what suggests that there was unanimous agreement to give up armed struggle in the future and
No,
just
to-
stick to constitutional struggle.
Not, does it say, did I write give up armed struggle?
Well,
I wrote keep to, wait, where is it?
you want to go through the half an hour again that we had on paragraph 4 at page 19. I'm quite happy to do that.
Okay.
But I think the conclusion of that discussion, long
To
and tortuous
keep
discussion,
keep following peaceful constitutional action.
well,
I would include something like for, as long as it was available or possible, yes. I accepted that perhaps I could have rephrased this better.
even
But
with,
fundamentally, I think my point stands that they were going to keep following
So,
peaceful constitutional
we don't need to
action.
read all the other paragraphs of the second document. Even with the second document, what Selkirk had said in his telegram was the correct interpretation, which is that,
The Barisan were communist controlled is wrong.
no, I didn't say that. Please don't interrupt. Although they see no feasible alternative to constitutional tactics, they weighed the merits of more direct action and would not hesitate to take it if it would pay, is the correct interpretation of both documents put together.
Yes.
Yes.
Communist control
So
is
your
wrong.
earlier suggestion that somehow the second document qualifies the first document is inaccurate.
I
And
didn't
when it
suggest
comes to
that.
page 19,
I just asked if we could look at both documents since I cited both of them.
I don't want to waste time
And
by referring to the
Maybe we
transcript,
could
but
could we scroll to the end? Is this the final paragraph of this document? I can't
well, this
remember.
is the final paragraph that I have,
Yes, so.
and I
as-
assume it is a final
As
paragraph.
far as I can tell, in all these paragraphs, everyone agrees to continue to follow peaceful constitutional action for the
Time
immediate
being.
future.
And they recognize that there is going to be a transitional phase. And
Yes, I accept down the road, armed struggle is, they never explicitly ruled out armed struggle. It's possible. Some people felt necessary,
yes,
and others less so.
and the problem,
But peaceful,
Dr.
keep
Thum,
following peaceful constitutional
And-
struggle.
I think you were good enough to agree looking at it again, page 19, the suggestion that he disregarded the unanimous agreement to keep following constitutional action. The way you have put it is misleading, and it should have been better phrased. And what Lord Selkirk said in his telegram on that second point is accurate.
On the second point, yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now you agree that in 1961, the CPM was completely controlled by China? Jinping says that.
If he says that.
So do you accept that?
Jinping says that. So if he's the Secretary General of CPM, and north of the Causeway, I have not disputed, I don't work on that aspect of the CPM.
Well, we are now talking about the CPM, which, where I think earlier in the discussions we agreed, as far as the CPM was concerned, Malaya and Peninsula Malaya and Singapore were one territory. And the CPM on both sides ultimately were controlled. There's one CPM, which deals with Peninsula Malaya and Singapore. Communist Party of Malaya, with different cadres.
I mean, there's the Taiwanese government claims to govern all of China as well.
We are not talking about the physical control yet. You were good enough to agree much earlier that for the CPM they looked at Peninsula Malaya and Singapore together. Are you qualifying that?
Peninsula Malaya includes Singapore, yes.
Thank you. And the CPM was controlled by China according to Jinping as of 1961. Do you accept that?
Yeah, if he says that.
Thank you.
Sure.
And you know that in 1961 there was a discussion I read to you. CPM was financed by China, and they agreed to resume armed struggle, correct?
Yes, you've read that, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Now let's look at the telegram another telegram, 7th of December. These are all British records, which you are quite keen to get into. This is from Moore, Deputy UK High Commissioner, to Ian Wallace. You have seen this document, right?
Yes.
Right. Now, let's go through this carefully. I enclose copies of reports which came to us last month from a reliable and well-placed source on 2 meetings held at the headquarters of the Barisan Socialists last September. Okay? We have seen those. These reports are of considerable importance, not only for what they reveal of the future intentions of Barisan Socialists, but because they provide more conclusive evidence than we have had hitherto for the belief that Barisan Socialists are communist controlled. Now, you probably won't agree, but isn't it obvious from this telegram that Mr. Moore has become convinced that Barisan Socialists is communist controlled?
Oh, I never denied that. Yes, of course, they believed that there was communist control, sure.
Thank you. They therefore have a clear bearing on the attitude to be taken to the Federation's request for repressive action, as we took the opportunity of telling Lord Lansdowne and John Martin about them during their recent visits. It has never been disputed that the communists in Singapore are following United Front tactics and that Barisan Socialist is their principal instrument on the political front. The British believed that, correct? In fact, even before the 2 documents.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Thank you.
There was belief, yeah.
But unless one was prepared to accept uncritically the evidence supplied by Lee Kuan Yew in his battle for merger, there was nothing very definite to go on apart from circumstantial evidence and stale security records.
Yes.
Now, however, there can no longer be much doubt as to what we are up against in Barisan Socialists. The report on the first of the two meetings shows that those engaging in the discussions were communists examining, quite frankly, how best to achieve their ends. Furthermore, we can see that the communist influence within Barisan Socialists is not confined to the Central Executive Committee, but extends to branch committee level. This is not to say that all members of these committees are communists. There were some notable absentees from the two meetings, but the communists seem to be sufficiently entrenched to control policy and action. And knowing what we now do about the extent of communist penetration within Barisan Socialists, it will be difficult to acquit many of the other leading members as unwitting dupes. Now, you are aware that the Secretary General of Barisan Socialists attended the second of the two meetings, correct?
Yeah.
Whom is not an answer.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you. So the British were absolutely convinced, based on the two documents, that Barisan Socialists was deeply infiltrated by communists, and the rest, who may not be communists, know that the communists were all over the place in Barisan Socialists. That's what the British believed, correct?
That's what Moore believed here.
Yes.
Yes.
He is a Deputy High Commissioner. Now,
Deputy Commissioner.
yes, I'm sorry. The substance of the discussion at the two meetings is also interesting. It is clear that although the communists and Barisan Socialists value the armed struggle highly in theory, they see no other practical cause for them at present but to pursue their aims by constitutional means. At the same time, they face realistically their difficulties in winning support amongst the Malays and English-educated classes and recognize that the reactionaries are unprincipled enough to intervene, if need be, to cancel any electoral victory they might win. They take comfort from the belief that in the long run, repression works to their advantage because it increases their mass following. Leaving out the reference to communists, the rest of the description is accurate of the two meetings, based on our discussion earlier.
Leaving out the reference to the communists?
Yes.
Support with yeah, it seems reasonable. Sure.
Thank you. This new evidence will naturally be taken into account in the security assessment that is being prepared jointly by the Singapore and Federation special branches for consideration by the Internal Security Council. This assessment is taking a long time to come forward, mainly because the first drafts were on the wrong lines. So-and-so has now tried to ensure that we eventually get a sensible assessment paper by preparing a draft framework. The Federation Special Branch are working on this framework, and I hope the result may be rather better paper than at one time seemed likely. So they weren't happy with the previous paper, but now with this new evidence, what Moore wanted was a paper that was professional and had a proper assessment, correct?
Actually, no. This was a political issue that was discussed with the Secretary of State for the Colonies, Duncan Sands, about the exact thrust of the special branch paper. If I remember correctly, the objection was fundamentally that special branch in Singapore were not willing to endorse certain conclusions because of a lack of evidence. And so what the British pushed through because of this new evidence is a new paper that would justify the arrest, which already had, if I remember correctly, been agreed to. Oh wait, sorry, what year? Yes, had already been agreed to before this at a meeting in London between Duncan Sands, Lee Kuan Yew, and Tunku Abdul Rahman. So what they needed was a special branch paper to justify the arrest.
Oh.
And the paper that special branch came up with simply didn't have any evidence. And so with this, they created a new paper that they felt was stronger.
You agreed that paragraph 3 of this telegram was accurate as long as you leave out the reference to communists and You agree that paragraph 2 accurately sets out what the British, or at least what Moore believed, the Deputy Commissioner. Let's take that for the time being. He says, now, however, in paragraph 2, there can no longer be much doubt as to what we are up against in Barisan Socialists. The report on the first of the two meetings shows that those engaging in the discussion were communists examining, quite frankly, how best to achieve their ends. Furthermore, we can see that the communist influence within Barisan Socialists is not confined to the CEC. I know you don't agree, but we are now looking at what the British believed. You agreed earlier that this is what they believed. So they believed that Barisan Socialist was deeply infiltrated by communists. It was not confined to the CEC, but extends to the branch level. They believed that it is a serious problem, and they believed that violence was not being ruled out. And they said, effectively, by implication, we were not prepared to accept whatever Lee Kuan Yew said in his battle for merger. But this new evidence shows us what is happening. Now, if they believed all of that, then the case for the security action is quite clear. Would you accept that? If they honestly believed all of that?
First of all,
Now,
both
please answer my question.
Well, I'm trying to answer your question.
It's capable of a yes or no, followed by an explanation.
Well, then I'll just say no and explain.
Okay.
So first of all, both Selkirk and Moore backtrack from this position. In later documents, they are much, much more circumspect about their assertions that there is communist control and about the necessity of arrests.
Yes. Well, Dr. Thum, can I then say, as of the 7th of December, this represented the, as you said just now, this represented the British views. As of the 7th of December, subject to whatever retractions later on, based on this, they believed that a security action was necessary.
And second of all,
No, 7th of December.
7th of December.
Yes.
This reflected their position as of this document. Sorry, I had something else I wanted to mention, but
Well, can you just
been
listen
a
to the question?
long day. Sorry.
Yes. As of the 7th of December, we have agreed that this is what they honestly believed, paragraph 2. And paragraph 3, you say, so apart from the word communist, the rest of what is set out is accurate reflection of the notes. Based on that, as of 7th of December, they were entitled to believe, they had an honest belief that security action was necessary. Yes?
As of 7th December.
Subject to whatever retractions they may have made later on.
But they had already decided on security action before this point, right?
I'm
That was
asking you,
decided
as of
middle
7th
the
of
year.
December, they believed.
The document needs to be understood in the context that security action had already been decided on, and they were looking for justification
So-
for the security action.
Are you now changing your evidence to say this is not their honest assessment? Because earlier on, you were prepared to accept that this was their honest view.
I would. How do I phrase this in a brief way that will satisfy you?
No, simply, did they honestly believe? I mean, does this set out their honest view as of 7th of December? Simple question.
It sets out an honest view on which detentions could be carried out. Yes.
Thank you. Now, let's look at 14th December. Chairman, Chairman, could I ask for 5 minutes? Could we take a 5-minute
Yes,
break?
okay. I adjourn this meeting for 5 minutes.
5 minutes, and then we
so
come back.
everybody can take a little break. Visit toilet and be back here in 5
Thank you.
minutes. Thank you.